Alrighty, friends, welcome back to the History with Tim podcast. Today, we're going to do a little Halloween special. Today, we have one of my friends, Trinity, on, and we're going to be discussing spirituality, ghosts, and spirits in general. She just recently returned from a trip from Savannah, Georgia, where she did a supernatural investigation. So, we're going to just discuss and see how things go on the subject of ghosts and everything. I hope everyone has a happy Halloween. All right, let's get into it. 3, 2, 1, action. All right, so here we go. Everyone, this is Trinity.
Hello.
So, we're going to talk about spirits, spiritual things, and ghosts. So let's start simply. How do you get into it?
So I think for a lot of people, it's something that you feel. From a very young age, I've always been kind of surrounded by spirits, especially of my grandparents that I didn't meet previously. I've always been interested in the paranormal personally. I've had a lot of fun with watching things with my dad and diving into that, and then moving to Savannah definitely opened that up for me. I believe that everybody has a different sense of beliefs when it comes to spirits and how it's interacting with the living and stuff like that.
Well, you and I have talked about that because my experience with spirits has been sometimes on par with your own, but also I've had insane experiences. But I go to much different locations than you. As everyone here knows, on the channel, I'm a Civil War historian, so I go to where pretty traumatic things have happened. So the spirits there are much more brutal, so to speak. Not to mock them or anything, but they went through a worse trauma than most. Someone who just passed away of old age or something. And I always say that is I think that's hell what they are going through, because they're just reliving that moment over and over and over again.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what prompted Savannah? Was that your choice, or was that a family choice?
That was a family choice. My family's also very big into history.
Okay.
So they decided to go to Savannah as a a family vacation, and we went there and everyone loved it, and they were we'll move here in 5 years, or retirement plan. Well, the retirement plan turned to 5 years, and the 5 years turned to 2 years. So within 2 years, I went from being in the Midwest to being in Savannah.
That's definitely a change of culture.
Yeah. A lot of people were worried about the culture shock, but honestly, I think I'm better for it, because Savannah's such a beautiful city, and you truly get that sense of southern hospitality with it that in some other cities you just don't get.
I will say that is definitely, as you know, I'm a New Yorker, so definitely a different culture shock for us. We're very angry people, most of us, and a lot of time we're not actually. They say that someone from the West Coast, they're polite but rude. Mm-hmm. But they say people from New York are rude but very helpful.
Yes.
So someone from the West Coast will be "Oh my God, I'm so sorry that your tire blew," and then they'll just drive off. Whereas a New Yorker will yell at you for your tire blowing while changing your tire for them. Yes. So I've always liked that. But Savannah, so what kind of spirits have you? We'll talk about both our experiences, but because New York, we also have a lot of spirits because a lot happened. Sadly, that's the reality of, I think, the ghost world and spirits. They congregate where a lot happened.
Yeah.
And Savannah, obviously, for the United States, especially of all places, it's like London.
Yeah.
Everything came through Savannah at one point or the other.
It's still a port city, so a lot of stuff still comes through.
Yeah.
With Savannah, it's kind of a wide range of spirits that I've actually experienced and interacted with there, because you have the Revolutionary War with all of that, because there was the siege of Savannah. Then you've got Sherman, who burned through literally all of Georgia.
I'm offended that no pictures were taken for me, but that's fine.
And then there's also the Civil War aspect of it, and it's especially hard in Savannah because it was the furthest south in states for the 13th colonies. Mm-hmm. So I feel there's a lot more heaviness there, especially with the enslaved population that was there. And a lot of the squares, Chatham Square, that is one square I cannot go into because it is just so heavy. And I viscerally get a reaction when I'm there. But you can put me in Wright Square and I'm
yeah, that's interesting because, like you said, it has a lot to do with these traumatic periods. And, something, we talk about the Civil War and things like that, but, I had a family who visited Savannah one time when they were coming down to visit, and they said they're like, you go to the docks, you get this dread. Mm-hmm. And my brother brought up to me, he's like, I don't get why there's dread. Why would there be dread at the docks? Why not in the city where Sherman burned the city down?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, first of all, Sherman didn't burn the city down. His guys got drunk and we're having a good time. Let's leave that there. I know every Southerner is yelling at me right now, but but the slave docks between Savannah, Charleston, and New Orleans, which is fascinating with New Orleans because New Orleans it was actually one of the more progressive of the southern cities. When the 13th Amendment was ratified, they didn't even have to ask Louisiana. They're like, yeah, we'll ratify it because they had such a heavy Creole, African Americans and white Americans mixed together very well in New Orleans. But, Savannah, you must feel the spirits of those, with the Irish, we called them coffin ships, the ships that came from Ireland to New York that hundreds died on.
Yeah.
But I can't, the slave ships, how many died that were just thrown off the side of the ship?
And when you're on River Street and on Bay Street, there used to be the Cotton Exchange,
Yeah.
which is still there today. Like, it's still one of the, buildings that's standing, and it's in pretty good condition, considering all things. But I know, they had slaves within them, individually picking and checking the cotton before it got sent out. And you have to feel that, especially when there's, so many of them that are there, because that's such a big industry within Savannah and, what it was known for.
Well, it's interesting because, you look at where the slaves were in the South, and you look at the different Virginia, for example, Virginia was, I like to describe it as the New York of the South. That was the big state that everyone, congregated around was Virginia. That's why they made it the capital in Richmond. Mm-hmm. But, their main export was actually tobacco.
Yeah.
Georgia was I think the majority was cotton, but they also did rice.
Yes.
Which is very interesting because I think a lot of Americans don't realize that how much rice really was. Mm-hmm. I also know that because that's Sherman pretty much just stole the rice plants when he was marching to the sea. But, you really, tobacco is a little easier to farm. Mm-hmm. You don't need the amount of people to farm tobacco. We have tobacco farms in upstate New York. They're big. They're huge. They only have staffs of 50 people. Mm-hmm. So you don't need a lot of people. But cotton is even with the cotton gin, it's a much more person demanding job.
It's very tedious and it's very hard. I know, controversial kind of, in middle school and in high school, they used to take the kids to the old plantations and show them where Eli Whitney went through all of his discoveries, and they would have you pick the cotton yourself from the farm and then go through what they experienced, and they were how would you feel if you were them and you were going through, and some kids got pricked because of the way that the stem is,
slices your hand up,
right? And that's crazy that they put the kids through that. But it's it's real world things that we have to look back on and reflect on, because if we don't teach it and we forget it, then we're bound to repeat it.
Well, not to get into modern things, but on some level we are. In countries in North Africa, the slave trade is back, which is horrifying to imagine, especially, I know the English like to beat their chests about how they're the ones that ended it, but 300 years later, and it's sadly back. And unfortunately, the powers that ended it before are far weaker than they were at that time. France was the first country to outlaw it, not only in France proper, because England was, we ended slavery in England, but you didn't end it in the colonies. You only ended it in England. But France in the Revolution was the only country that actually ended it in both the home country and the colonies.
Yeah.
Which kind of bit them in the butt, because that's when the Haitian uprising happened, because they're enough, we're done with these whites. But, it's very interesting subject, especially because, Jefferson in the, right after the war and everything, they were sitting and they were talking, he was actually a proponent of ending it. He was let's end the slave trade, and it passed. But then, fast forward 30 years, he's dead, everyone's moved on. It was, I think it might have been Georgia. They were the ones that proposed to restart it, which would have been a bold move because you would have been going against the British Empire, who's the most powerful empire on earth, compared to us, who we barely won the War of 1812 against them. But that's something I when you guys told me you were going to Savannah, I was like, I wonder if they're gonna go to slave docks, because the amount of people that probably came through there, the amount of trauma that's tied to those docks.
Well, they've changed a lot of it too. Like, there's very little remnants of the slave docks in the terms of like it being notarized, because they don't want people to idolize it and to go there and like cause something.
That makes sense.
And a lot of the buildings directly on the water, if they aren't made of Savannah stone, like Savannah brick, it's like a gray stone that's like lost to time. You can only find it in Savannah.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
We learned that at the actually at the Railroad Museum in Savannah, because it's one of the few, I think there's only 2 in the state, roundhouses that are still standing from like 1813.
Wow.
And it's all made of like Savannah stone.
That kind of makes me Sherman did that much worse.
No, I know, because it was all like buildings that were made of wood, and you can see where, like, obviously the foundation of like River Street into Bay Street, like underneath Bay Street is all stone, but like once you get to Bay Street, it is primarily either refurbished stone, like granite, like the City Hall building, or it's like a little bit, because like on one side of River Street, like when you're going towards like Presidents and Broad, there's like the cookie cutter small houses that were the original slave homes of Savannah that were on the outskirts of the city.
So what do you mean by like there was just a giant slave city or something like that?
It's kind of like that. Like you can, I don't know how to explain it. Like,
was it like a shanty town kind of thing?
Kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense, because when I remember learning about Sherman's March, obviously it's something I've studied a lot, which also I think it's unfair to blame Sherman for everything that happened. It was Grant who gave Sherman the order. He said, destroy everything, the total war order, which is something that historians shake at hearing a general give, because that's a horrifying order to give, because that's total war is just destroy everything. Destroy the people, destroy the supplies, and, regardless of what side they were on, they were Americans and they were doing it to them. So that makes it horrifying in itself. But they took all the slaves from the surrounding plantations and everything, and I read something about something similar, shanty town, because they were trying to entrench the city, because they knew, okay, if he's marching from Atlanta, he's going to go to Savannah, because then he could march right up to Virginia. And I remember them telling the stories about like they would just shoot them if they weren't doing hard enough work and building the trenches and stuff, and it was horrifying stuff. But that made me think of that, you bringing up the shanty towns.
And it had to go all the way, like if you're looking at Savannah head on from the river, it would be all the way to the left, because they couldn't push them at the back of the city, because at the back of the city was like where all the forested area was, and then they took that risk of their slaves trying to run and trying to escape, so they pushed them to the left side of the city. And like when you go to the right, like you start seeing more of those like well-structured like granite buildings that like you could tell made up of most of downtown. Yeah. That were preserved for the most part, but again, Savannah is a city burned down twice, built on top of itself. Like you go over a bump in the road, 99% sure it's a body. Like they can't even break ground in Savannah, because then they have to get like the genealogist in, they have to call like forensics, because they're digging up graves at this point.
That's that's like Washington Square Park in New York City during the draft riots, which is probably the stupidest thing New Yorkers have ever done. We rioted because we didn't want to go fight. It's kind of like we were in our heads, because New York was a Democratic state. We're like, we don't want to go fight this Republican war in the South that we don't even agree with. So they rioted. But Lincoln was like, I'm not going to have the biggest city in the North rioting. So he sent soldiers from the Army of the Potomac who were just at Gettysburg. They were literally cleaning up the battlefield. He's like, stop what you're doing, go to New York, put down the riot. And they buried, I think, something like 150 New Yorkers, which most of them, unfortunately, were Irish immigrants who weren't able, or Irish, German, Poles, who weren't able to buy their way out of the draft, who were rioting, firemen, cops. And, I know that's a big thing in Washington Square Park. When you're there, you can definitely feel something, because you could feel the anger, the rage, and everything.
And in Madison Square in Savannah, it was a mass grave for the Revolutionary War for the British soldiers, because their barracks were actually built on top of the house that I went to.
Really?
Before it was built, it was the British barracks.
That's it's because that's another interesting thing about like the South. What's so different from the North? In the North, our cities were very compact to this day because, you know, New York City was founded by the Dutch, and the Dutch have a certain way of building, and, you know, the English came in and were like, no, just leave it.
Yeah.
Who cares? But, like, you know, then you look at a city like Boston, which is very similar. Boston, have you ever been to Boston?
I haven't.
Beautiful city. It's actually one of my favorite cities on the East Coast. The worst, probably after Charleston, like city planning wise.
It's squares.
It's literally built like London. It's like
Yes.
street here, there.
Yep.
Like, it's ridiculous. But, you know, it was easier to do like quartering soldiers there because it's like, well, we can't build these things, so just put them in these people's houses.
Yep.
Which, if you look at like the American Revolution, it makes sense why the northern states were more angry. I mean, the northern colonies were more angry than the southern colonies.
Yeah.
Because southern colonies, there's all
room.
this land, just
Yeah.
build it, it's fine. But the northern colonies, it's like,
It was already established.
yeah, so put them in the Petersons' house. You know, it is
Right.
what it is, and that's, I think, what drove a lot of people to be like, screw the British.
Yeah.
As I'm seeing here, a red shirt. But yeah, that's something interesting about Savannah. And you were saying about the house.
Yeah, there's multiple historical houses within the city of Savannah, and SCAD is there, which is the Savannah Art and Design University. It is renowned within Savannah for bringing it back to what it is today, because as their final project, they have to do beautification to the city, so they pick a rundown place and completely renovate it, from like architecture to interior design to artistry with murals and stuff like that. And
That's
so
really
like their
cool.
final is that. So it helps gain them experience, but also helps the city of Savannah with maintaining itself, because a lot of downtown is considered like the historic district.
Yeah, makes
And
sense.
like we have the Owens Thompson House, we've got the Sorrel Weed House, the Andrew Lowe House. Then there's also different museums, like Girl Scouts are huge because it was founded in Savannah
I didn't know
by
that.
Juliette Gordon.
That's
And
interesting.
like, if you want Girl Scout cookies, come to Savannah in fall, because woo, they're on every corner.
I'll be honest, as a proponent of girls and Boy Scouts, I often call the Girl Scouts a Ponzi scheme. So that's now that Boy Scouts are allowing girls in, I'm much more pro Boy Scouts again, which I think we should stop calling it Boy Scouts, just call it Scouts of America. We're the
Literally.
only country that doesn't do that, which drives me nuts. But the only I found out the reason we can't do that is because the Girl Scouts refuse to give up their copyright.
I can't blame the girls. They're little entrepreneurs.
They are.
They gotta make their money somehow, and they get me every time with those $6 to $8 boxes.
You know what's so funny? My brothers love Girl Scout cookies. I can't stand them.
You haven't had the right ones.
I think that's what it is. My brothers love the Thin Mints, and I'm like,
Okay. Controversial opinion. I don't like the Thin Mints. I don't care if you put them in the freezer.
Well-
I don't care if you put them in the fridge. They are just not good.
you and me are on the same front there.
They have a new one that's like a s'mores that I'm like dying to try, because that's one of the best things about Savannah, is because like you have the foundation there, literally, from the founder herself. If you go on one of the tours, they let you try all the cookies. It's kind of nice.
I'm not gonna lie, that's why I like going to the Guinness tour.
You gotta try everything, right? You can't buy it if you don't know what you like.
I might not be able to go back to Ireland after this, but me and a friend, we did a tour of the Guinness distillery in Dublin. And I go, hey, can I take this cup as I actually have it. It's in my cupboards over here. But I was like, can I have one of these cups as like a souvenir? They're like, well, actually, you got to buy one downstairs. And I'm just sitting there. I'm like, how much is it? And they go, oh, it's €15. And I was like, it's like $30. And they're like, well, yeah, it's a souvenir. And I was like, okay. And then the guy looks away. I look at my friend. I'm like, we're just leaving. And we just walked out.
I don't blame you, man. Like,
I'm gonna land in Dublin in a few months, and I'm gonna get arrested. They're like, "Oh, we heard you, laddie. We knew."
but as far as like the houses that I've been to, like there's also like the museums, like the Telfair Museum, that's also like historical with the like original founders of all of that, because they're so, like the thing about Savannah is like there's a lot of old money in Savannah.
Well, it makes sense, because I would say Savannah, like, because even, you know, when you look at like the country, I actually have a game called Empire Napoleon Total War. It's like it's a strategy game.
Yeah.
But it's like logistics and stuff too. You have to like run a country and everything. And I always notice the cities that are like the New World like trading post.
Mm-hmm.
It's always New York, Boston, Baltimore, which is weird. I don't even think Baltimore actually has a port. I think their port's technically Annapolis, and Savannah. and Charleston. Those are always the 5, regardless of what game it is. So, Savannah, the way I see it, Savannah and Charleston, which is kind of interesting because of how close together they kind of are in the scheme of the country.
Yeah.
Those are like the big hubs
They are.
of trade in the country, especially in the 13 colonies era, like the colonial era, because we didn't own New Orleans yet.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, New Orleans was no offense to people from New Orleans, stupid place to build a city. That you have
It's
to,
so under.
yeah, so when the levee systems blow again, and that's where he lives there now. Yeah, but it makes sense. Savannah has such a deep rooted like history, especially with spirituality and stuff.
Yeah.
The stuff that's gone in and out of that city.
And I know that like the city prides itself in being one of the oldest cities and being one of the most haunted cities. And like I have genuinely just been like walking around the city and have felt something. Usually on River Street, most people are too drunk to notice because it's best known for Wet Willie's, and I can't blame them. Can't fault them for that.
I'm
Wet
guessing
Willie's
that's
is
like
great.
Savannah's Bourbon Street, like that's
Kind of,
their
yeah.
party central,
That and
the Times Square of
literally
Savannah.
And once you go to like City Market, you've got like all the bars and like the good food through there. Like it's great. But as far as like Moon River Brewing Company, even like it's got so much history, and it's right on Bay, which is like right above River
That's
Street.
from Savannah?
Yeah,
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
yeah.
I'm sitting here. I'm a fat man. I'm a fat man. I wish I knew that. I didn't know that's from Savannah. I think I go to Savannah.
But it's originally it was used as like a hotel, and then during the yellow fever outbreak, it got turned into a hospital. And then when they it obviously ran down and like refurbished it, and they reopened it as like a restaurant and a bar. And like Ghost Adventures have been there. I believe Shane and Ryan from BuzzFeed Unsolved and The Watcher went there. I think even Taps went. Don't quote me on the Taps, but I know the other two
I used
have.
to watch Taps all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of miss Taps. Taps was a good show. I like when they used to do the European ones.
Yes.
I remember they went, was it Hitler's Bunker?
Yes.
I think it was one of his like Eastern ones.
Yes.
That was a cool one. I like when they do those ones because it's like, it's crazy to imagine like they're in there.
Mm-hmm.
But like we're talking about all these spirits and things, and it's easy. Slavery, obviously, that's a trauma.
Yeah.
Let me actually find this quote real quick. This is one of my favorite quotes. This was Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. For those of you who know, he was a colonel at Gettysburg. He soon became general of his corps. He actually accepted the Confederate Army's surrender at Appomattox Courthouse, which is, considering he was a theology teacher from Maine, that's quite a rise for someone. But he said, time passes, bodies disappear, but spirits linger.
Exactly.
He said that, I think it was the 10th year anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg. He was actually the last Civil War veteran to die from battle-related wounds.
That's crazy.
He got shot like 10 times.
Jeez.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh my
And
gosh.
surprisingly, none of them were at Gettysburg, which you think that would be where he would get shot.
Right.
He did get shot in his scabbard, I believe, at Gettysburg. But he did not actually get wounded. He got shot off a horse like 4 times too.
Jeez.
Yeah, my man was hardcore.
He didn't.
But, I think about that quote all the time, especially because, like, you know me, I go to Gettysburg at least once a year.
Yeah.
And I've been going since even before I was born.
Yeah.
For some reason, my dad thought, you know what? I just married this hot rich girl. Her dad's a aeronautics engineer. I'm going to take her on the best vacation ever. We going to Gettysburg. But, we've been going every year since my parents have been together. And, clearly we get to later. But, every time I go, you always feel something. And one place I hate to go, which I don't know if you're aware of this place, it's called the Railroad Cut.
Sounds familiar.
So what happened with the Railroad Cut was the Union were dumping on the first day of battle to stop the Confederates' advance because this was a weird scenario that the Northern Army was coming from the south and the Southern Army was coming from the north into the town. Don't know how it happened, but weird situation. But they were dumping guys in. And the Confederates, I believe, from Archer's Brigade, which these names probably don't mean a lot to you, but it was one of the more elite or veteran of the Confederate regiments. They were trying to find safety So they saw this incomplete railroad track, and they're like, if we go into there, we can recover, reform, and then come back out and fight. But what ended up happening was the Union saw them withdraw into there. So what they did, and I think, oh Jesus, what's his name? It doesn't matter. Colonel in one of the Union regiments said it was like shooting fish in a barrel.
Yeah.
Because what they did was they literally just went on both sides of the railroad cut and just started firing down into the railroad cut at them. And then they decided to charge in while the Union was still firing into them. And, you know, you go there and you're standing on the railroad, because it's not a functioning railroad, obviously. The National Park and the Gettysburg Trust did everything in their power to make sure nothing ever happens there. But, you know, you sit there and you just... It's the same thing with a place like Culp's Hill, where a lot of the most violent fighting happened, which I feel like in the subject of Gettysburg never gets brought up. You know, people always talk about Little Round Top and Devil's Den and things like that. Culp's Hill is like almost a 90-degree angle, and guys were getting shot point blank marching up it. You know, you feel the fear, you feel the anger, you feel you feel the dread.
You can just feel the despair.
Yeah, because
Crazy.
you know, I often say that about a place like Pickett's Charge too. Like if you go near the Kadoorie farm, you know, I do the walking trail because I'm a hardcore for some reason, but I like to walk it, and me and my friends will go to the Virginia Monument, which is across the field, and we'll do it. We'll do the walk. And, you know, it's weird because when you're walking across, you actually feel optimistic. But the second you get to that wall, you just feel...
It's like a drop-off.
Yeah, it's like, holy, what the... Because not only because, you know, for me, someone that knows what happened, I'm sitting there like, I can't... These guys probably thought they were going to win. These guys thought that this was going to be the end. And then they got here, and then they just got flashed off. But then you also... You feel it in you, because even my friends that were with me, you know, they kind of know what happened, you know, they're still learning, but they're sitting there like, dude, I just got depressed.
And it's a very weird and surreal feeling to know, or like feel somebody else's feelings that isn't your own, and it's not somebody that's with you. Like, you know, you can be an empathetic person, and I can tell, like, when you're in a bad mood, and being like, oh, well, Timmy's not doing great right now, but, like, we'll let him be. But then it's another thing entirely to, like, be cognitively aware that it isn't you feeling it, it is somebody else's feelings that you're feeling. And it, like, for a long... Especially for me, being a medium is, like... Growing up with that, I just thought I was empathetic and was just like, man, this is crazy. What do you mean nobody feels like this? Nobody else feels this? And then everyone's like, no, it's just you. And I'm like, great. Amazing. I'm just crazy,
I'm just a lunatic. It's fine.
Right. And, like, even down to, like, seeing the spirits and stuff. Like, speaking of Moon River, like, bouncing back to that, one time I went to dinner with my family and, like, I was starving. I was so hungry. When we finally got in, my appetite literally disappeared, and I felt like I was being watched. And I told my dad.
I hate that one. That's
the worst feeling.
That's actually the worst of those feelings.
And so I told my dad about it because my dad is also a big, like, paranormal buff like myself. And so I was like, do you feel it? And he was like, yeah, I'm a little uneasy, but, like, I'm not nearly as uneasy as you are. And then I was like, you know what? Like, I'm going to go to the bathroom, see if I can, like, splash some water on me, see if I feel any better, like, cool off. Because usually the bathrooms are cooler in Savannah because of the AC. So I get up and I'm, like, walking down the hall, and, like, a gentleman comes out of the men's bathroom, and I, like, back up against the wall because it was a narrow hallway. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And then, like, I turned back and looked at my dad, and my dad's looking at me like,
what are you doing?
What the hell are you doing? And then, like, it dawned on me, the gentleman that came out of the bathroom didn't have legs. It was just his torso up to his head. And the craziest thing
horrifying.
about it...
That's pretty horrifying.
Because then I went, wow, that's... Did you see that? Like, am I crazy?
That's... Jesus.
And then when I, like, sat there and, like, was just standing there, like, a waiter walked by me, and they were like, oh, did you see the general? And I said, the what? And they're like, yeah. Like, did you see a man dressed in blue? And I was like, yeah. He was wearing, like, a... And then they finished it for me. They were like, it was kind of like a Union soldier, wasn't it? And I said, yes. And they're like, yeah, he frequents the bathrooms, but just be careful, like, he might lock you in, and kind of laughed. And so I was too scared to go to the bathroom, and I just went back and sat down at the table because I was like, nope, I'm good.
Well, there's this place in Gettysburg. I've talked to you a few times about it because I think if you go to Gettysburg, you should not go to this place. It's called the Orphanage. It was where I actually have on my channel, for those who know, I did a video about it because it was built by the people of Gettysburg for the children. Because back then, the way custody laws were, if the husband was gone, the children were forfeited to the government. Because the belief was spinsters couldn't take care of children.
Yeah.
So what happened was you had all these children whose fathers, you know, both sides, because Gettysburg was a north and south town, even like Frederick, Maryland, and all these other places, their children went to this museum. I mean, with this orphanage. And, you know, people like Ulysses S. Grant visited it, George Meade, all these generals, you know, because these are the children of their soldiers that they want to check on. But, you know, there was this, oh my God, Rosa Carmichael. I'll never forget this woman. Horrible, horrible woman. She took over after, because the woman who Gettysburg assigned to run it was the wife of a soldier who died. She ran it with her children, and she got remarried, and she decided to leave Gettysburg because, one, she wanted to start a new life, and two, bad memories. Because, you know, this is the other thing about war I think a lot of people don't realize, especially in our climate right now. War leaves a psychological scar.
Yes.
But it also leaves a very permanent scar.
Yes.
You know, you go anywhere in Gettysburg. Honestly, I'm talking about my trip to France. I'm hopefully doing this spring or winter. You go to Verdun. You go to all these places. Even if they're not preserved, you can see like where the trenches used to be. You know, Gettysburg. You still see the artillery placements. I went to Petersburg in Virginia once, and the trench lines are still there. Like they're sunken, but you can see where these guys were fighting. And, you know, she, I guess, was like, it kills me to imagine my husband died here.
Yeah.
And she left, and the town needed to hire someone. I believe she was from Maryland, because Gettysburg's right on the Maryland-Pennsylvania border.
Yeah.
Named Rosa Carmichael. And what she did was she hired teenagers to be her groundskeepers, and they abused the children. They would beat them. They would lock them in the sheds. You know, the famous dungeon below the orphanage where she would lock them up with chains and everything. And, you know, my experience there was I went there with my family and friends, and we were down there, and they did this thing that which I think one of our friends talked about when you guys did your thing. They shut the lights off and something happened.
Yeah.
So we were doing it and in the orphanage, and it's scary because the chains are still on the wall.
Yeah.
And you ask them, like, are these the same chains? And they're like, yeah. And you're like, Jesus Christ. You know,
yeah.
They
it's a lot.
I was like, they destroyed Gacy and Dahmer's house. Like, Jesus.
Yeah.
But, like, what she would do is she would chain them and put these kegs of water in front of them and leave them there for days. And what would happen is they would, like, literally either die of thirst or they would fall in and start drowning. And then one of the guys would come over and laugh and pull them out. And then this whole thing would start again. And, you know, that, to me, when it's children involved, it makes it that much more sinister and evil. And obviously the town, in the weirdest way, figured out what was going on because the children didn't come to the 4th of July. No, the Memorial Day, which, fun fact, Memorial Day actually got founded at the end of the Civil War. Grand Review Day is actually Memorial Day. But it's when the whole Union Army marched in D.C. But they were doing a parade for Memorial Day, and the children, obviously, because their fathers were in the cemetery, they would march in the parade. But for 2 years in a row, they didn't come. So they were wondering why, and then they went to her, and they're like, we want to see the children, and we want to see your books. We want to see the number of children still here. And when they lined them up, they figured it out. They're like, where are these children? Why are they missing? What happened? So you go there, and, you know, me and my friends often stay at the Gettysburg Inn of 1863, which used to be a Holiday Inn. It's a beautiful hotel. It's right across from the orphanage, though. And we were walking back one night, and some of my friends are skeptics. After this, though, they weren't skeptics. You know, we were walking past the orphanage because it's right on Cemetery Hill, and, you know, I'm a psycho. I like to be out there. You know, maybe a ghost will come and stab me or something. But we're walking back, and we're passing the cemetery, and we come past the orphanage, and you just get this feeling of not one, not two, just people staring at you.
It's several.
And when we did the tour and we went to the dungeon, we're sitting there, and I was like, I am not sitting by this wall. And they're like, why? And I'm like, because I'm going to get grabbed by something, and I don't want to get grabbed by something. And I was like, and you know what? It's going to be this creepy guy in the Union uniform who's giving the tour. But so we're sitting there, and I'm sitting in the middle like this, and we shut the lights off, and I hear one of my friend's girlfriends start screaming. And you know me, I'm a run towards danger kind of person. That's how I've always been. I literally jumped up, I took my phone out, I'm like, what the? And I turned, and she's like this. Her arms are literally out like this, and she's like this, but there's nothing holding her arms. No. And I go, what are you doing? It's like, there's something holding me, there's something holding me. And I'm looking around, and I'm like,
there's nothing there.
I'm like, what are you talking about? There's nothing there. And then as I'm saying that, I feel something push me. I go, what the? And someone took a flash, and I got to find the picture somewhere, because when we got the picture done, because this was back when it was... and you know what's funny? I'm not even that old. I'm not even that old.
But like, remember when?
It's so funny because when I used to go like to places with my dad, he had a phone that could take pictures, but he always be like. But so when we finally got the pictures developed, that picture, you see me doing this. There's just a black mist next to me, and I always like that is what because like I said, I've gone to Gettysburg a lot. And honestly, not even just Gettysburg. Long Island, we're old too. Especially our connections with the Algonquin and Iroquois.
Yeah.
I mean, you've talked about the Seminoles a lot.
Yeah.
The connections down here. So I've seen things. That was the thing that finally made me say, okay, I'm not screwing with these guys anymore. This is...
And it's always different, like, especially for me, because, like, a lot of my friends know, and my family know that I'm a medium. So I always warn them, like, I'm like a power bank. Because they know that they can, like, communicate with me, they can touch me, they can talk to me, and, like, I can hear them, I can see them, I can smell them, like... It's like I warned Alexis and Kelly before we went in, and I was like, if I see anything awry or if I feel something's wrong, like I will let you guys know. And like Timmy, I am not even kidding. I have been to that house like 4 or 5 times, and when I walked in, I immediately looked at them and said, "This is unlike anything I've ever felt before, and I don't know what we're getting into." And
that's
Alexis
never
was like,
never
no, right?
That's
She was
never
like,
a good sign.
Why don't you say this as soon as we get in? I was like, because I'm being honest. Like, I don't want you to like regret it later.
That's when I come out of nowhere like Han Solo. Like, I got a bad feeling about this.
It was really like that. And like, I've been a handful of times, and I usually try to take my friends that have either never experienced anything, because it's like the Sorrel Weed House is a very active house, and like I've taken a handful of my friends there that either don't believe and are like skeptical, or like they believe, they just never had anything happen to them.
Yeah.
And like one of the scariest experiences that has happened that I've witnessed happened in that house. And like I've had a lot happen to me. Like I've been scratched, I've been pushed, I have been like I'm gonna say this, and it's gonna sound way scarier than it was.
Okay.
I was jumped.
Don't like that. Don't like that one bit.
It's kind of like a mini possession almost, but it's not like a full takeover. It's like
you're starting getting religion now. You're starting getting religion now. And as a Catholic, I'm still concerned that the church has an exorcism department. And that it has thousands of employees. That concerns me.
No, but like thank God they're there, because it ain't gonna be me.
Thank Christ, honestly.
But like that, even though it was like daunting to me, because like I could feel the other half in me.
Yeah.
But like that did not trump what I saw with my friend Alexis, and it isn't.
No, I get. Yeah. I'm gonna assume if you said my friend, it's not our mutual friend.
Yeah, not our mutual friend. She is of Latin descent, and so she's got like I wouldn't say like super dark skin, but she's darker skin. She's got like the long, dark, curly hair. Everyone genuinely thinks that she's mixed, and she's not. She's just 100% Latin descent. And I took her with me because she like loves all things spooky, and I was like, you have to go to this house. Like you will have so much fun. And like I tell everyone, like if you feel like something is wrong, trust your gut. Be honest with me.
Oh yeah, no, that's a fact when it comes to spirits.
And if you don't feel comfortable, we don't have to continue it. We can leave at any point. It is like you come and go as you please. They don't lock you in. Unless you pay for that, and we didn't pay for that. I don't think anybody...
We didn't do it. I didn't want to be harassed by the ghosts.
No, it's mostly for my friends' safety, because if they feel spooked, like, you should have seen Kelly, like, right next to that door ready to book it if she needed to.
Did she tell you what happened when I showed her Ghost of Gettysburg?
Mm-hmm.
She almost spent the night.
No, I know. And that's what I mean. So, like, when I took them, like, with all my friends, especially with Alexis, like, there's 3 components of the house. So... you got like the basement area, which is where they did all the cooking and the cleaning. There's a hall down there called the Shadow Man's Breezeway. And this is like an 8-foot, 9-foot shadow person, 3-dimensional.
Don't like that. Don't like that.
Neither do I.
Don't like that at all.
And like when I go in, like the first thing I say is like, I know you guys are here, and I know you guys want to be heard, but do not show yourself to me. That is nightmare fuel.
You're not like Elsa. You're not like, show yourself.
No, absolutely not. So... there's the basement part where he usually resides, and, like, you might see a soldier or two, because it was also used as, like, a surgery room during the Revolutionary War, because the original owner's son was a surgeon.
Okay, that's cool.
And then you go up to the 2nd floor, which is technically the 1st floor, where the main, like, door is. They have the women and men's parlor room, they've got the study, they've got the dining room, and then they have, like, the staircase that takes you upstairs to the private residence. But then they also have the carriage house, which the bottom half is the gift shop, the top half is the slave house, which is crazy to me.
Facts.
And personally, like out of all the places in the home, I don't like the breezeway just because I simply do not wish to see the man, the myth, and the legend himself.
Yeah, I don't like anything about Shadowman. That scares me. That stuff scares me. I don't like that.
And up in the carriage house, the first time that I went, I was like, we were doing like a brief of like, this is what this equipment does, because they provide the equipment there. And they were like, okay, we're going to split you into groups. Okay, this group, you're going to go upstairs. Everybody else, you're going to follow me. So we were the first group upstairs. And as we were going up the stairs, like, have you ever been on a cruise ship?
I love cruises.
Okay. So you know that feeling when you first get on and like you're trying to get used to your sea legs?
Yeah,
and, like,
you're walking like Jack Sparrow.
Literally,
like,
yes. You
yeah.
feel like that, but then like when you go to take a step, the ground meets your foot and
Yes.
you're like kind of
Yes.
off kilter. I felt that going up the stairs and I was like, that's so weird. Like that's strange. I got up, I'm not even kidding, Timmy. Like I got up four stairs. Like I'm still at the very much the bottom of the staircase. And I get this overwhelming sense of just absolute despair. And I'm not even kidding. I literally start sobbing and I am just freaking out, crying. And I'm like looking at my friends and I'm like, this isn't me. And they're like, what do you mean this isn't you? You're the one crying. And I was like, but this isn't my feeling. Like, I don't feel this. I'm just feeling it. It's somebody else, like, projecting it almost.
Well, you know, I'm not going to obviously say specifically where we work because we need some privacy. Yeah. But, you know, that one location I used to work at, the incident that happened there. And when I was doing my first day of training, me and my friend were training together and we go there and my trainer's like, okay, we're going to sit here for a little while. I was like, okay. And I was like, it was like maybe a minute, not even. And I'm like, I kind of want to leave.
Yeah.
And my trainer goes, why? I'm like, it just feels really sad here. I was like, I don't know what's going on here. I was like, it feels like someone died here. Mm-hmm. And she looked at me and was like, yeah, because someone did. Yeah. I was like, oh, I was like, please God, why am I at the one attraction here that is haunted? Mm-hmm. But, you know, it definitely is a feel, you know, I'll say at least I was an administrator at a camp. And one year, there's a myth there. You know, not many people know the myth, so I don't have a problem telling people. But, you know, the camp was founded in the early 1900s. And there's a story, there was a guy, they call him the Trench Coat Man. Mm. And he was... I don't like it. Oh, no, it's horrifying. But the story goes, he went to World War I. He fought there for the French because America didn't enter until later on. But he fought the first, 4 years. But he actually got sent back to America because the French didn't like how violent he was. He did it for fun. Mm-hmm. He wasn't doing it as service, like for a cause or anything. He was doing it because he wanted to do it because it was like a license to kill. So he moved to this place, which at the time wasn't part of the reservation as a whole, because you had the small reservation here, there was a farm here, and then there was woodland here. So he was in the woodland. But at the camp, kids were going missing, and no one knew what was going on. So he would only ever attack during a blood moon, which is so ominous. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I obviously, before I ran this camp, I was going as a scout for a while. And I would hear these stories. I'm like, no, it's crazy. That wouldn't happen. They wouldn't let that happen here. So there was one night, it was a blood moon. There was also a lightning storm going on. I probably should have been fired for this. But we would have provisional campsites where kids who wanted to come extra weeks would go. But at one point in the summer, we would let them go do manhunt. And they would do it at what's called the Christmas Tree Farm. Mm-hmm. The Christmas Tree Farm was a old part of the woods that was part of the old property of the people that used to own the land. But there was other things that happened there. But so, you know, one night I'm sitting in my office, you know, being me, you know, being serious Tim, not Timmy. And I get a phone call and they go, Tim, where are the provisionals? I was like, they're playing manhunt. And he goes, it's like, you see the lightning outside? I look outside. I'm like, yeah, it's pretty cool. And then there's like this 2-minute silence. And I go, oh, God. Because the way the farm is set up is the trees are all on the edge. And then it's an open field in the middle with a single post in the middle of the field.
Nice.
So I go, oh, God. So I jump in a Pargo. I go driving up there. And I scream at the scout. I'm like, get the kids back. And they're like, what's wrong? What's wrong? I'm like, just get the kids back. So I'm sitting there. Now I'm the number one target because I'm the tallest person in the field. But I'm sitting there. I'm waiting for the kids to leave. And I'm like, ugh. So I turn, and there's this little ridge. And on the ridge, there's someone standing there. And I look at the person for a minute, and I radio over. I'm like, do you have everyone with you? And they're like, yeah, we counted like 7 times. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I put my radio down. I'm just staring at the guy, and he's staring right back at me. And I just look at him for a second. And I take my other radio, and
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Was he wearing a hat?
No.
Mm-mm.
Which made it that much. Well, he was wearing a screwdriver hat.
Yeah.
Which I hated.
No, the only reason I'm asking is because, like, I feel like I can see what you're talking about.
No, dude, horror. I'm
it looks
happy.
like nightmare fuel.
Yeah. Well, but it was not only that. He was wearing a gas mask.
Oh.
I could see it, and
I
was just staring at him for a minute. And at first, I didn't think anything about it. I was like, oh, it's a fucking kid got one. Because we would do program, and for some reason we had gas masks. I guess it was just to be stupid. I don't know. It was just pretty much whatever you had at your family's house you brought to make costumes for the camp. Mm-hmm. And I kept staring at him, and I was like, take my other radio. I call the Rangers because they're the ones that have firearms.
Yeah.
I'm like, can two of you meet me up at the Christmas tree farm, like right now? And, they're like, Tim, you're really not, because it's like on 101. It's like, you're really not supposed to be out there. It's dangerous. I'm like, I get that. But I'm looking at something that doesn't look right.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there for a second staring at him, and he does this.
Oh.
And I just...
No.
Because I'm far enough from him that he can't hear what I'm saying.
No.
Because I know I'm a loud person, but I'm like just quietly, because I don't want him to hear me.
Yeah.
And I'm just like... And he just slowly makes he does like this, and then walks into the trees, and I go... Yeah, I'm like, I have to go follow this guy, because...
You let it go!
My job as an administrator was to make sure the kids were safe. So I radio, I'm like, the guy's going, I gotta chase him. They're like, do you have anything with you? I'm like, I have a bat. And they're like, do you think you're gonna win that fight? And I'm like, I hope. So the way the woods is set up is there's the open field here, the ridge is here, and then on the other side is another open field. It's like 100 yards in both directions. Mm-hmm. So the guy goes through this little patch of trees that is there, and I run forward, and I go into the patch. Can't see him. I have a light. I'm looking around. I'm like, where the fuck is this guy? And then I walk into the other field, because there's no way, regardless if he was running, I wouldn't have seen him. Mm-hmm. So I walk around for a second. I'm just like, I'm in Vietnam. I'm like, this guy in the trees. I'm about to get jumped, and it was just so weird. But I started smelling the smell. It was sulfur.
I knew you were gonna say sulfur, and I hate that.
I just sat there for a second, like, and then the two Rangers pull up in quads, and I go, and they smell it too, and I'm just like, we should probably keep kids away from here for a little while, and they're like, yeah, and then I get back all the way to the administration building, because my office was separate from the administration building. The way it was, you had the dining hall, my office was in the dining hall, and then the administration building was this big building on the other side of the camp. Mm-hmm. So I drive over there, and, I'm getting chewed out because I let the kids go up there, which I deserved it. Yeah. But, I'm sitting there, and I take my boss aside, and I go, can I ask you something? And he's like, what? I'm like, that like legend that everyone always talks about, the trench coat man, is that real? And he's like, well, from what we know, a guy was arrested and executed for, like, murdering people in, like, the early 1900s. And I was like, Did he like wear anything while he did it? And like, well, he usually wore his coat, and I think it was a gas mask or something like that. And I was like,
great, beautiful.
So I get back to my cabin, and I'm sitting there like this, and my roommate actually, who was living with me, he was one of my managers. Me and him, I'm sitting there. He comes in, and I'm just sitting there like this, and he goes, "What's wrong?" I'm like, I'm just not gonna go out at night anymore.
No, it changes things.
Well, and what scared me about it was because the way the camp is, it's not like cabins; it's tents. So I'm like, okay, one, it's a ghost, which it's horrifying, but at least it's not as dangerous as it could be.
Yes.
Second, there's a maniac in a trench coat running around, and I have over 5,000 kids that are in my responsibility that I have to look out for. So I'm just sitting there, him talking about it. He's like, you want to go back up there? And I look at him for a second, I go, not really. And he's like, you want to go back up there? I was like, yeah, let's try it out. So we go back up there, and we're walking around, and we're looking for it, and we find the footprints of what used to be a building. Mm-hmm. And we thought it was the farm of the people that used to live there. But he points out, he's like, no, that's over there because that's by the cemetery. Because there's a cemetery on the property because it's a family farm. So obviously there's a cemetery. And we're looking at it for a few minutes. And I swear to God, I'm just hearing cracks and stuff around me, and I'm like, we need to leave. I was like, I feel something here. It's angry. It doesn't want us to be here. I just need to leave. And he's like, yeah. And he's a fearless guy. Like, he doesn't care. And he's like, yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. Let's get out of here. I forbade the rest of the next 2 years kids to go up there.
I don't blame
Just because
you.
I was like, because that's the thing about spirits, to talk about like that whole Vatican thing. If they're angry enough, whether it's him or it's Rosa Carmichael in Gettysburg, they will do harm if they can do it, because that's how they were in life.
Exactly. Yeah,
and that scares me more than anything else, and that's why I get scared by ghost children, because
I don't trust them.
yeah, well, not only that, but it's also, if they die naturally, in Gettysburg, this place called the Farnsworth House, the owner's son accidentally got killed once, and that was an accident. That is what it is. But then you go just up the Baltimore Pike where the orphanage is. Those are kids who were tortured and suffered.
Exactly.
So it's like, yeah, this is sad at what happened, but this was brutal.
Yes.
And the person that perpetrated this is evil.
Yes.
And that's what scares me about those kind of spirits. It's like, you're evil.
Exactly. And to go back to, like, that room I was going up into, like, as I was making that stairs and I was crying, the story goes, at least for the house, there was a slave named Molly that was being harassed and being sexually assaulted by the master of the house, Mr. Sorrell. And his wife walked in on them once, and his wife ended up completing suicide later that afternoon because she was so distraught. And she wasn't even allowed to be in the family crypt. Like, she's in an unmarked grave in Savannah, because if you die by suicide...
Well, Georgia's a very Catholic state at that time, colony, so that makes sense, because that's the right of the Catholic Church. Suicide's illegal.
Right.
Well, not illegal, it's a sin.
Yeah. And, like, literally 2 weeks after that, like, Molly was found hanged in her room. And because she was property, there was never an investigation. So I knew I was connecting with Molly, and I knew that's, like... what she was making me feel was how she felt. And I've told everyone that I go into that house with, like, the hallway, dead wrong. But Molly's room, I can't even cross the threshold. Like, I physically cannot go in that room because it is too much for me.
I feel that.
My friend I took with me, Alexis, I was like, I would go anywhere in this house with you but that room. So you're on your own, sister. I'll be right here. I will save you from here. And she went in and she was like, it's fine. And I was like, yeah. And, like, at this moment, I was facing away from her. I was facing the fireplace that's there because, like, I thought I heard a marble drop, which there's a little boy there named Bobby, and he plays with marbles. So I was like, oh, okay, Bobby's here. Like, I'm feeling for him.
Okay.
And then in my head, I heard, get out. And it was a strong male voice. And I got nervous and I was like, that's weird. So I, like, immediately have this, like, sixth sense to turn around and look for Alexis. And I'm mid-turn, and over the spirit box that this other couple had, screamed, get out, in the same way that I heard it in my head. And I turn around to look at Alexis, and her eyes are, like, the size of saucers.
Wait, is this your friend Alexis or our Alexis?
My friend Alexis.
Okay.
I wouldn't have.
Well, because I heard something similar happen with our Alexis, and she freaked out.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that one, too. But my friend Alexis, like, went to go through the door, and you could physically see something holding her back by the waist. She couldn't get through the door frame. Oh, and I immediately sprinted across the room, and I grabbed her arms and pulled her into the room with me, and I'm, like, holding her, and I'm, like, looking her up and down. I'm like, are you okay? And she goes, something was holding me in. Like, I don't know what it was. Like, Trinity, I've never had that experience before. I'm like, we can leave. We can go right now. So we went out to the courtyard, and I'm, like, looking at her, and she goes, have you ever had anything like that happen before? And I was like, no. I'm going to be honest with you. I can't think of what it is. And then as I'm sitting there, like, trying to console her to finish the rest of the investigation, because I was, like, literally within the first 13 minutes of us being there, I got this, like, sudden realization that, like, she was the only one in that group that was a female that was not white. And she was, like, I don't know if it was a protective spirit trying to separate her from us because we were white, but the gut feeling I had was Mr. Sorrell was trying to keep her in the room, and I didn't like that. And it, like, to be honest, it really upset me because I was like, first of all, you don't get to hurt the living. You've done your time. You've been, respectfully, dead for a really long time, and you did what you did in life. You don't have to do it to the living today because it's completely different. We ended up finishing the rest of the investigation and the next morning I told her how I felt, and she was like, "Why didn't you say anything last night?" And I was like, "Because I didn't want to freak you out." Like, I'm trying to be a good friend.
I experienced, well, not very more like the emotional part, like you're saying. So I went to Petersburg in Virginia, and there's this place called the Crater. Now the Crater was the Union actually put loads of gunpowder under the Confederate trenches because Grant wanted to end the war, because obviously people were dying. He was sick of it. Lincoln was pushing him. And the idea was by a guy named General Burnside, who was in command of the 12th Corps. And yes, that's where Sideburns comes from, is that guy, his mustache, beard. But plan was they were going to blow it up. And in the 12th Corps was the Union colored regiments, U.S. coloreds, which were U.S. African Americans who volunteered, and they decided to come and fight for their freedom. And last minute, which this kind of falls on a guy who I actually really like named George Meade, he was the commander of the army. He told Burnside, no, don't put those guys there. And Burnside was like, what? They've been training for this. They're the only people who are prepared to do this. And he said, if this attack fails, how is that going to look? Because then it's going to be blamed on the colored troops.
Yeah.
And Grant, unfortunately, agreed. He's like, actually, I agree. You know, President Lincoln's going to be furious if we send the colored troops in first and they get massacred. And Burnside was furious, obviously, because he's like, my other regiments have not been training for this. They have been. Because the plan was, once it blew up and the crater was made, the colored troops were going to go around it. The white troops did not know that, so they charged into it. But at Petersburg, there's this monument, and it's to the U.S. colored troops because they fought bravely there.
Yeah.
But there's this part of the Crater battlefield. It's off to the right. I don't know why. It was pouring. Honestly, that's why I think I got sick after driving back from Virginia. But that's why I scared her.
Yeah.
But I was walking around, and I got to this point, and I just started crying. I don't know why I started crying. I just started crying. And I just sat down, it's raining, I'm in the mud, I'm just miserable, I'm just sitting. I was actually wearing an Africa hat, because it was the only hat I had. But I just started crying, and I don't know why I started crying, and, a National Park Ranger came over, because he saw me, and he's like, Are you all right? He's like, I don't know why, I feel miserable. And he's like, well, what happened here? And I said, what? And he's like, well, during the battle, two Confederates grabbed one of the colored troops, because the colored troops ended up making the attack anyway. They just weren't in the first wave.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was he pulled them, and he said it's believed it was in this area. And one soldier took his ramrod out, which I don't know if you've ever seen a ramrod. It's literally just a rod of iron. And he started whipping the soldier with it. And while the other soldier was loading his gun, he went to shoot him, but it hit the colored soldier's belt buckle, so it ricocheted. And then he shot him with the second shot, and that's what actually killed him, because the Confederates had a strict order that any African Americans caught in uniform were not to go to prison camps. They were to be executed. So, I'm sitting there, and he's telling me this. I'm like, oh my God. He's like, a lot of people come here, and they feel it right here.
Yep.
Because they're feeling that man's last moments, which were probably... Because apparently he was screaming things like, I'll be your slave, please, God, just please stop hitting me, please. And it was found out later he actually was a free man. He never was a slave. He was from Boston or something. And it was just I was like, oh my God, that's what I like about that quote from Chamberlain about spirits linger. Because you definitely, my stepdad, well, not my stepdad, someone I know really wants to go to Normandy. And I want to do it too, because I'm a history person, and I really want to go to Waterloo and all these other places in Europe. But I think about, stuff like the Triangular Field at Gettysburg, where some brutal fighting happened, and you can feel that. And then you think of places like that in Petersburg, what happened to that poor guy. And I just think about it. I'm like, do I really want to go to these places and feel that feeling, that despair, that terror?
It's very somber.
It really is. That's why, you call it hollow ground.
Yep.
My friend's in England. He specifies in Vikings, but he's a archaeologist. Which, if there's two people that hate each other more than anything, it's archaeologists and historians. Because historians want to preserve the fields, whereas archaeologists want to dig them up.
Yeah.
But the Belgian government made it a rule that you can't disturb the ground at Waterloo. And me and him get in fights about it all the time. And I'm like, it was the biggest battle in the European continent after Leipzig at that time. And he was like, which Leipzig was the Battle of Nations. That's where pretty much everyone ganged up on Napoleon and beat him, which you overwhelm someone, of course you're going to win.
Yeah.
I'm a Bonapartist. But I think about something like that, like Waterloo, like the French soldiers who were so hopeful.
Yeah.
Because they're like, our emperor's back, we're going to be a great empire again, and then that all just gets snuffed out.
And on top of that feeling that, like, is already there, there's a lot of beliefs that if you disturb the land or disturb the places, it makes things worse, because then their place of rest is no longer a place of rest. It becomes like either a museum or it gets sent to one. And it's like you're breaking that peace. And that's part of like the big heavy debate with Savannah, and the other thing why they're like, you can't break ground because of stuff like that. And I know, like, for me, as, like, a Savannian that's been there for plus years, there's certain parts of the city that I can enjoy, but then there's others, like Chatham Square, like, it literally takes enough out of me because of it. And for the same thing, like, Chatham Square was originally the slave trade square, and the first black church is on that square, the first black school is on that square, like, as, like, to show where they once were and where they are now. Like, it's supposed to be like a commemorative thing, but there's nothing in that square that honors those that were sold and killed there.
Yeah.
And I remember doing a walking tour with my friend Taylor, and we were walking up onto the square, and I was like vibing, having a good time, learning all the history of Savannah. And then I'm walking onto the physical square itself, and immediately I feel that watched feeling, and I'm like looking in the trees, I'm like looking around, and I'm starting to feel anxiety, and I'm like, this is weird. And then I start feeling this like really sad, like bubbly feeling, and it's not, I don't know how to explain it. Like, when I say bubbly, it's kind of like anxiety, but it's like this just absolute loss. Like, it feels like there's no fight worth fighting for anymore. And it's like beyond despair. It's like beyond that feeling. Like, I don't think I've ever personally in my life felt this feeling.
Felt that defeated.
No.
That you can't do anything.
It was like, even being dead, it's not even worth it.
Well, the saying is, it's much harder to be living and struggling so much than just to die. Yeah. I think Caesar said, it is far easier to find men who would just agree to death than rather continue with a struggle. Exactly.
And I remember, like, I'm, like, looking around, and I'm starting to, like, I feel my heart racing. I feel like I'm going to start crying, like, almost like a panic attack.
Mm-hmm.
And then I feel this, like, little hand grab mine, and it's, like, a small hand. Like, I wouldn't, like, about the size of my niece's, and my niece is 4.
Okay.
And I feel this, like, little spark of hope. And I was like, this is so crazy, because, like, like, I just had this feeling that I knew I was holding the hand of a little girl. And I broke down crying, because, like, putting that into perspective, like, this 4-year-old spirit was seeking comfort to me. Like, when she herself probably went through some of the worst things. And then this, like, the tour guide came up to me, and he was like, hey, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm just really everywhere emotionally. Like, when I step off the square, I'm perfectly fine. But when I step on, it's this weird feeling. And I feel like, I was like, I know I'm going to sound crazy, but, like, I feel like there's people in the trees. And he just kind of, like, blinked at me, and he was like, I need you to come with me. So he took me over to the next tour guide, and he told her what I was feeling. And the other one was a female, and she was like, females tend to have emotional reactions to the square. Do you know anything about the square? And that's when they told me about it being, like, the slave square, and it was the back of the colony, so if they killed them, they would just drag them out back, leave them in the forest, and just go on. Pits. Right. Yeah. And she was like, the hoodoo and voodoo priestesses that came with their people have since returned to this land and cursed the land, and have put watchers in the trees to protect those of their descendants so that they don't suffer the same fate that their ancestors did. And she was like, it's very telling that they allowed themselves to be felt and seen by you. And I said, why is that? And she's like, because only people of color have come forward and told me specifically on this tour that they have felt their ancestors watching them. And it's typically people that are from, like, African descent, and like specifically like the West African,
Where the trade would
right.
have been.
And they also said that most of them have old family ties to slave trading here in Savannah. So it's usually like a familial line.
Yeah.
And they're like, but it's odd because you are not a person of color, but that's like a high honor that you feel them because we don't feel them. And we do this to her every day.
I think that's a very true thing, especially the familiar thing. You know, my family were Irish. We suffered through, you know, I was actually, when I did my ancestry and I found out, like, we used to always be like, oh, we're 90% Irish. We're actually, my family's very close to that. We're almost, you know, I only have a little German and Belgian, which Belgian isn't real, it's French or German. But, you know, I went to, in Dublin, they have docks like that because of the coffin ships where they would put people on that were fleeing, going to Ireland during the famine. And we had a weird, it was so weird, it was a taxi driver. It was the craziest thing. My sister and me still talk about it to this day. This guy just, because he doubled as a tour guide.
Oh, okay.
But so I went to the statue for this guy named James Conley, which everyone gets shocked when I tell them that. They're like, he was a socialist. I'm like, okay, he had principle though. I respect people that have principles. And I was like, I don't care what his political beliefs were. He was a good man and he was doing what he thought was right. So whenever I go to Dublin, I always go and take a picture with the James Conley statue. But we were miles away from our hotel. Like, my sister's like, I'm gonna kill you that you made us come all the way over here. But we found a taxi driver and, you know, picked us up. And I was in the front seat and my sister and my brother-in-law were in the back seat. And, you know, me and him just started talking about the history of Dublin. And he's like, oh, I have to show you this one thing. And I was like, what is it? And he's like, it's the best thing ever. I won't put it on the fare. We're just gonna go do it. Well, guy brings out a book out of nowhere. It's all his, because he does tours.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Interesting way they do their taxis there. Taxis own their own taxi. I didn't know that. It's really cool. But so we go to this old dock where the famine people would go to get on boats. And actually, he's like, they think it's over there because that's where the monument is with like the emaciated people. He's like, it was actually over here. Because the way they would come in, they would dock the ship in, they would load on, they'd go right out and south, and they'd pick up people in Cork and go off. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then, you know, we started walking to it. And my sister's in the car still. She's furious because now we're going to be like 3 hours late. But I was having fun. And I just like got to a certain part and I just froze. And he looked at me. He's like, how Irish are you? And I was like, oh, well, you know, my grandfather was 100%. My grandmother's 90%. My other grandfather is 90%. You know, because my other grandfather's mother's name was very Irish. Honestly, my last name is the only German I have in me. But, you know, he's like, I find Irish people from America feel very disturbed right here. And I just thought about it. I'm like, the amount of people, because if you know one thing about like Irish Americans, we're very proud of being Irish. It's, and you know, my ex's from a long time ago, sister was dating a guy from Ireland, and he's like, I don't understand why you Americans, you're so proud of being Irish. And I go, because we fled because we had no other choice, and then we made a life for ourselves here, and we showed them that we deserved just as much as everyone else. You know, I often point to the Irish Brigade, where I have descendants from. You know, these were guys who came here, were treated like absolute garbage, but when the call came, they said, I'm going to go fight for my adopted country and prove my worth. And, you know, going there and standing there, it just, you feel the spirits of all those who didn't make it. And it hurts to imagine, you know, they're still there. You know, Dublin obviously is different than it was in the 1840s, but like, you know, they're sitting there and they're just like, just asking for a piece of bread, some corn, just something to help them. And there's a series called Young Victoria, which is about, not Young Victoria, it's just called Victoria. It's about Queen Victoria. And there's an episode I absolutely hate. Kelly actually walked in on me watching it once. I absolutely hate it because it makes Queen Victoria look like she actually cared about what happened to the Irish. And it infuriated me because I was like, she was all on board for what they were doing to us because we were Catholics. The only way they would give us food was if we converted to Anglicanism. And it's like, you know, not to get dark, but, you know, I hear people a lot of times say the potato famine wasn't a genocide. It was very easy for the British authorities to help They had the supplies, they had the food. The United States sent them food, which there's a very sad story about that. I'll tell you when I'm done. But the United States was sending food. France was sending food. Germany was sending food. Everyone was sending food to help. And the English were being gatekeepers and were like, you can get your food, just convert.
Yeah.
And, there's this scene in the Victoria show where a mother dies. And the little kid runs to the local pastor. And the pastor actually runs to the Anglican pastor because he's richer. Because the Catholic, obviously, is not going to be as rich as the English in occupied Ireland. And he's like, we need food, we need help. And the pastor goes, okay, I'll go help. And they get back to the hut, and the mom's dead already. Because she gave all of her food so her children could survive. And it's that sadness that really hurts me. And then, when my grandmother passed away, I don't know what you know about my journey back to New York. I stopped at Fredericksburg because I'm a psycho. And when I'm grieving, I decide to stop at battlefields. And I went to Maury's Heights. That's where the Union Army made their wave attacks. And I just started crying. And, for a minute, I thought I was crying because of my grandmother. But I thought about it. And I was like, no, my grandmother lived a good life. She's with my grandpa now. She's, as a Catholic, I believe she's in heaven and everything. And I just remember this thing about Fredericksburg. Maury's Heights before the battle was cornfields and wheat fields and things like that. And I thought about it. I was like, the men of the Irish Brigade who made those assaults were dying on the fields that were meant to save them.
Yep.
And that's why, they say at Gettysburg, at Fredericksburg, they saw the Aurora Borealis. And the men in the Irish Brigade said it was actually God welcoming his children home.
Yeah.
Because that's the one thing I've always heard about, like ghost stories and everything in Fredericksburg. They say they never heard any reports of Irish ghosts. It's always Southerners. It's always regular Northerners, Germans. It's never Irish. And I often think about that. I'm like, the trauma, especially of that situation. What makes it even more sad is it was Irish versus Irish, because it was Irish Confederates on the hill firing down on Irish Union. But it's also, they didn't know who they were fighting.
No.
So it's just the trauma that Earth must have felt. And then I think about them seeing the Aurora Borealis that night. And I'm like, that's very far south to be seeing that.
Yeah.
And there's reports from everyone. Even Robert E. Lee said he saw it. So it clearly happened. It's just, this is what I mean about spirituality and ghosts and things like that. I'm very much of the idea that you're an idiot if you don't think it's real. Because energy doesn't die.
No. It just changes form.
Yeah. So, that's why they have those pictures where it's like they see light leaving bodies.
Yeah.
It's like that's their energy leaving. And, this goes into the idea of faith because, when that energy moves on, where's it going?
Yeah. And I do believe to some extent that, if a soul's journey is complete, then they can continue to go to heaven. Because I do believe that there is a paradise. But there's definitely choices where people can choose to look after their loved ones and can choose to be spirit guides for the living. And they give up that idea of heaven because they want to do right, because they feel like their job isn't done even in the afterlife. Or they go through trauma and they feel like there's no way to move on past it because of certain circumstances, like they've been murdered and they didn't seek justice from who hurt them and whatnot.
Well, that's that guide, in the Catholic Church, we call that guardian angels. And, not to get too personal, but like I said earlier about my parents, when my father passed, it's always been my grandpa Louis was always my brother's guardian angels. And my great grandma was always my sister's guardian angel because my sister, when she was young, used to see my great grandma all the time, even after she died, and my brothers used to see my great grandpa. I had never seen a family member. And when my father passed away, my mother said, "You have a guardian angel now." And that hurt. I'm getting a little choked up thinking about it right now. But I remember I have these situations. 2 years ago, actually before I met any of you, I had a weird dream. Because I have dreams of my father a lot, which is weird because they correspond with things actually going on.
Yeah. I don't mean to interrupt again.
No, it's fine.
But the entire time we've been here, I felt him. I know he's here with you. And I'm not just saying that, he's very proud, but it's
I appreciate that.
Of course. I didn't want to say anything because I wasn't 100% sure. And that's also another thing, like with me, I'm always like,
No,
I don't know, and I don't want to say
I'm
anything. 'Cause I
I'm
don't
welcome to it. I'm welcome to it. It makes me happy to know he's around. But I had this incident 2 years ago before I met any of you. You know, before you, Kelly, Alexis, anyone. My father, I had a dream, and we were on the steamboat. That's always where I'm with him, and it's the weirdest thing ever because my dad didn't like boats. Mm-hmm. He was afraid of the water. He was afraid of heights, and we were on the steamboat in you know where. Mm-hmm. And he's sitting there, and he's like, "I need you to do me a favor, Timmy, when you wake up." I said, "What?" And he's like, "You need to call your brother." And I said, "Why do I need to call my brother?" He's like, "When you wake up, call your brother." So I was like, "Okay, whatever. I'll call him when I wake up." So I wake up, and I call my mom, and she's like, "Have you talked to your brother yet?" And I said, "No, I was going to call him after," because usually what I do is I wake up and call my mom first, just to check up. Lately, I haven't been doing that because I've been working earlier shifts, and I don't want to wake her up. But that's what I usually do. I'll call her on my drive to work, and I'll talk to her. I was like, "No, I was going to call him when I was in the car," and she's like, "Hang up, call your brother." And I was like, "Okay." So I called him, and I like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "Oh," and it had something to do with my father's estate, mm-hmm. which I was actually in charge of originally because of my connections in the government. Mm-hmm. And I ceded it because my grandpa, the one that just passed away, asked me to. He said, "Can you please let your brother do it?" Because he hasn't done anything. Mm-hmm. And I was like, "That's fine." But my dad, I just remember my dad was being so vehement in the dream about it. He was like, "You need to wake up. You need to talk to your brother." He's like, "Get the passwords, get everything." And I kept thinking, I'm like, what does get the passwords mean? And then my brother told me about what was going on. And I was like, I don't trust you with this stuff anymore. Give me the passwords. And literally later that night, I got home back here and I was sitting there for a second and I said, "Get the mm-hmm. I was like, and I literally, that night I switched all the passwords and everything over. But I always have this weird dream every anniversary of his death. Mm-hmm. He died in the spring. And it's always the night before. I have this dream and we're at the park and I'm with everyone else in my family but him, and someone approaches me and they say, "Your father's waiting for you." And I've gotten to the point since he's passed away that I look forward to it because me and him can talk. And
did they show him in a light?
Yes, there's a light, but I never. It's crazy because in the dream I never know who the man is, mm-hmm. but when I wake up I know who he is, mm-hmm. and we both know who I think he is. Yeah. As I have memorabilia of him all over the house, mm-hmm. and I always just see. He always asks me, "What do you want to do? Let's ride the. You want to ride Thunder Mountain? You want to?" I just gave that away. Yeah. But he always asks me what you want to do, and I always say the same thing. I just want to sit and talk.
Just want to spend time with you.
Yeah. And I've had that dream for the past almost 7 years, constantly, mm-hmm. on the anniversary of his death. And that's the other thing. My oldest brother, he's very skeptical, which I don't understand how he's skeptical, because we went to the Farnsworth House in Gettysburg, which is where the snipers were, mm-hmm. and me and my brothers were all Civil War reenactors. And this idiot, for some reason, thought it was a good idea to wear a Union uniform in there. And after like 20 minutes, he kept feeling like he was getting like stabbed. Mm-hmm. So he left. And
crazy how that works.
Well, because he didn't understand why that would be happening. Yeah. And the tour guide, after he left, was like, it was very stupid for him to come up here dressed like that. And
it's disrespectful.
Well, not only that, and we asked, well, why is it? They're like, I have Confederate reenactors come up here all the time in their uniforms. They never get bothered. Yep. Union reenactors always get bothered. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, it's because they're Confederate snipers up here. Mm-hmm. But my brother always, it was, my father passed away. He always was like, I wish Dad came to me. And I always tell him, like, well, not because I say his name. I was like, well, you had a different relationship with Dad. Me and Dad had a very strained relationship until the end. So we were never able to have that relationship you two had at one point. Mm-hmm. And, he always gets upset because me and my sister both have him. We both feel him around all the time.
I am going to say this, maybe you can extend it to your brother. They give signs all the time. They come to you in dreams because you're open to it and because you do believe. But when you shut yourself out like that, you were your own barrier. And sometimes when they show you physical signs, whether that be through animals, through light, through whatever, people are very quick to justify it, and then they're just like, oh, never mind. And if you over justify it, they almost feel like the signs aren't doing what they're supposed to do.
Well, I've told Kelly about that
Yeah.
with her grandma, because I was like, the signs are all around you.
Yes.
I was like, and I told her, it's when she did that balloon thing.
Yeah.
I told her earlier that day, I was like, she's here. She's always with you. Like, I don't have that feeling like you do, but I have the feeling of my father.
Yeah.
And I can feel that presence with me a lot of the time. But I tell her that all the time. I'm like, you need to not be afraid of it.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Because that's another shutdown.
Yes.
If you're afraid of it. You know, my sister, she used to get afraid of it. Because, like, something like a light would be shining on a picture of my father. Or something like she would smell his pipe smoke. Or something like that. You know, that's actually his pipe right there on that counter. I told her, I was like, if you want to... I was like, it's not there to scare you.
No.
I was like, it's actually... Because I always tell everyone that when I'm ever feeling him. I always say, I'm like, it doesn't scare me. I feel at peace. I feel like he's with me. And, you know, I think about... have you ever seen the Lion King musical?
Somebody, yeah.
The song Endless Night. That's how I felt right after he died. I was like, you promised you'd be there. You promised you'd be here for me. Because he was very opposed to me working where I am now. But I also found out it wasn't that he didn't think I could do it. It was he didn't want me to leave.
Yeah.
But now that he's gone and he's able to be with me wherever,
Yeah.
I think it's different. But I think that's something a lot of people don't realize about spirits. And like your situation with that girl, they're not always there to scare you. They're there for comfort.
Yeah.
They're there because they actually sincerely feel your, they say animals and children have good judge of character, but they also say they have the sixth sense.
Yes.
And I often say that, my mom used to call me St. Francis because animals love me. I am always good with animals. But now I'm older, I'm a little more hostile. But it's actually more so that I'm loud. But I think a lot of times we fear what we don't understand.
100%.
And that's, and I think that also plays a thing in history itself. Because, you look at something like the Aztecs. What they did was horrendous by our, sacrificing and doing things. We look at Vikings. What they did was horrendous, what they did. But at the time, that's what they thought was the right thing to do.
Right.
And, I don't think there's any...
Sorry.
Don't do that.
Sorry.
Don't do that.
No, I'm sorry.
Please, God.
I'm not trying to scare you.
There's a reason there's crosses all over my bedroom.
No, I don't think it's in your bedroom. Do you often feel like he's sitting in one of those two chairs over there?
Yeah. I think he's always in that. That's why I always sit in that chair.
Because I keep looking over in this direction because I feel like he's in this chair over here in the corner.
That makes sense. So he's staring at me when I walk back from work all the time.
It's more like he's just observing. It's not a bad thing. It's like he's proud of the life you've built.
Yeah, well, that's sure. Well, that's that goes back to my old job too, because I like how this has now gone from spiritual to like Timmy's therapy hour.
And it usually does. It's always connected.
Yeah, well, I was part of my job was I had to teach Scoutmasters how to be Scoutmasters, which was stupid because I didn't know how to be a Scoutmaster. But I didn't realize one of my dad's friends were in one of the classes. And in the class, I started off, I'm like, I probably don't know, because the way the camp was set up was they were sub-camps. So I really only knew the people in my camp.
Yeah.
But he was in one of the sub-camps, and he was getting Scoutmaster training. And, in the middle of the meeting, I go, I probably don't know half of you. Some of you I might know because you might be from New York, but other of you, I don't know. So who here thinks they know me? Because... obviously, I moved up the ranks in the camp, too, so some of them might know me just because I taught their kid something. But, I chose a few people, like, oh, you taught my kid this, you taught my kid that. And then this guy goes, I was your father's best friend. And I go, oh. I was like, wait, what? I was like, how do you know who my father is? And then I saw his head come out. I'm like, Romano?
You're like, hello?
I was like, what are you doing here? As my accent comes out. But, later that day, he's like, when your father passed, I felt like he was coming to me a lot. And I was like, yeah, no, I get that feeling all the time. And, he came to my office one night because his kid had, his son is on the spectrum. He has problems. And some of the kids were fighting. And he ran to me because he said, he's like, you're comforting to him. And I was like, oh, well, that's nice. You know, he was under my desk. I was like, Jesus. But I was like, you're right. And I was sitting there, and Romano walks in, and he sits with me, and he goes, oh, I had a dream about your father last night. And I said, oh, yeah? I was like, what, it was when you guys went to Hawaii or something? You know, because they were friends, you know, like how me and my roommate are friends. And he went, no, it was him actually before he died. I was like, oh, did you see him before he died? He's like, no, I just had a dream about him. Like, he came to talk to me. And I was like, oh, what'd he say? He closed the door, and he just looks at me. He's like, he's very proud of you. And I was just like, please get out. I was like, please get out.
No, because I don't feel like he was a man of words. Like, I don't feel like he was, like, a forward-facing, like...
Let's say I get my observation skills from him.
Yeah. Like, he seems like he's very guarded and very, like, stoic, almost.
You know, Kelly one time told me I should do a reading with you. And you're,
it comes out of nowhere,
considering I've never talked about my father with you before, you're hitting him pretty on the head.
Because to me, like, do people tell you look a lot like your dad?
Lately, they've been telling me a lot.
As you get older?
Yeah, they
but
say.
But when you were younger, you looked like your mom.
Yes. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Did your... This is gonna... I'm not trying to be mean when I say this, okay? Because this is what he's saying. Like, do you have your father's hair?
I wish I had my father's hair. I definitely have his hairstyle.
Yes.
Yes, I have his hairstyle. He's the one that enacted that in me.
Because he's, like, showing... Like, I don't think I've ever seen it. Like, did he ever have long hair?
Yes.
Because he's the total opposite of me. Like, he's always about keeping it short, keeping it nice and tight. And he's just like, let it go.
Well, it's funny because when he was young, we used to call him John Travolta because he used to have the long hair. But he used to criticize me because I used to have very long hair, kind of like he did. And my sister used to say, "It's like, what are you talking about? You used to look like John Travolta in Boogie Nights. You're commenting about him." But that used to be a joke me and him had with each other because we would see. This is why I wanted it to be like this because this is actually, I think this is very interesting, especially for people to see it. I swear to God, she knows nothing about my father.
I don't even know his dad's name.
Yeah, I've never told Kelly anything about my father just because it's...
And we haven't talked about it,
Yeah.
but were your parents older when they had you guys?
Me.
Yeah.
Me, yeah. They were in their 30s, late 30s.
Okay. And, like, all things considered, do you feel like your dad died sooner than he should have?
Yes. Well, he passed away, unfortunately, from liver cancer.
I was about to say, because to me it feels like sometimes when spirit shows me things, it's like symbols for different things. So to me, they showed me like a scan of a full body, and then there's like green check marks, and then there's like red X's. And to me, it felt abdomen, and like you said it was liver.
Well, he went through, not to get too detailed, he was going through organ shutdown.
Yeah, I was about to say, because to me it seems like it was like a Christmas tree, just like all lit up. Like it went from like, it was one cause that just like progressed into more things.
Yeah, that's
But at the end,
pretty good way to put it.
Did he try to go through chemo?
No.
That was his choice.
Yeah, it's, he... I don't want to get too personal on here, but
And I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's, you know, I wouldn't have. I don't want to, you know, everyone watching and listening. It was a personal choice not to.
Yeah, and was there resentment within the family, thinking that he should have done more for himself and he didn't?
Yes, and then here comes Nick. Everyone, Nick's here. Just so you know, that's what that noise in the background is. Let's go, Spook. This is Nick, my roommate. This is Trinity. She's from work. All right, but yeah, it was there's still resentment probably about that. Yeah. I would agree.
And were you not able to say goodbye in the end?
I was. My sister was not.
Okay, because
he was drugged by the time she showed up.
Did they? I don't know, like, is medical coma a good word to use? Like, he was so drugged up that, like, he didn't really know what was happening?
Yeah.
Okay. Because to me, it makes me feel like, although he didn't, like, he wasn't cognitively there to the eye, like, he makes me feel like he heard and felt everything. Like, I don't know if you were holding his hand on the bedside. I don't know
Whoa.
if you whispered something in his ear, like something about like it's okay, and I forgive you, or for whatever the strained relationship was. And then I hear like, I'm sorry, I couldn't be the one to tell you. And I don't know what that means. It probably makes sense to you.
Yeah.
It doesn't to me, but...
Yeah, it does. It makes a lot of sense.
And
considering what happened, yeah. Yeah, it was not fun.
No.
It was not a fun process. That's why I'm happy to think he's around.
Yeah.
He's
Do you
probably
smell like the pipe smoke sometimes?
Yeah, that's actually, I think, one of the reasons I like to smoke a lot with him, because it gives me a little more comfort.
Yeah, because like I feel like sometimes you walk in and you just like catch a whiff of it and then it like disappears. And like sometimes do you smell like his like cologne or like body wash or...
Yeah, it's actually funny because I don't use Old Spice and I smell it all the time. I'm like, my other brother says he's that's his thing too. He smells it all the time.
And see, those are like the signs that like dad is still trying to give, but like your brother's just like, it's nothing.
Well, that used to, that also used to, to go back to history. Whenever, he can probably agree to this, even though I don't say anything. Whenever we go to a place like Gettysburg or something, you always can smell the sulfur. There's this one time we went and, I know any women listening to this are going to hate to hear this. I think something like 300 horses died at Gettysburg. So the town, instead of burying them, because it was going to be tedious to bury all these horses, they lit them on fire. They piled them up off of, it's called Steinware now. I think it was Chambersburg Pike, though. They piled them on the corner, because at the time, the town, that was the outskirts of the town.
Yeah.
So it didn't matter. But now, at night, if you're walking by there, you can smell something. And
Yeah.
You're like, what the? You're like, yeah. And, as someone who's been around dead animals, sadly, because, I'm a hiker, you find dead deer all the time because some hunter decided not to clean it up or something, raccoons, you live in New York, you see all the dead animals that get hit by cars. It's a distinct smell.
Yeah.
And, when I was young, I didn't think anything of it. But as I grew up and I started smelling those smells, like you just drive by a dead deer on the street, you're like, but like once you smell that and know what it smells like, and then you smell it again, you're like, that smells like something's dead. That my mom used to say it all the time. She's like, it smells like something's dead. I'm like, how do you know that? And she'd be like, Timmy, there's dead animals everywhere. Like we live in New York, they get hit by cars all the time. But I always, when I'm passing Steinware, which is what that part of the Chambersburg Pike and Gettysburg is called now, you can smell it, and it's awful. It's this horrendous smell. The people in Gettysburg were saying they could smell it for years after. It's just like it became part of the town, that smell. But that was 160 something years ago, and you can still smell it at some parts of the town. And even that, like animals, I was actually telling Alexis this story, our Alexis, because she was telling me about what happened in Savannah. I was telling her, one night, me and my family, because we're psychos, we decided to drive down Confederate Avenue, which is where Pickett's charge took off from. Now, there's this position in the Army called by columns into line. So what that is you're marching column like this, and then when you're going to make an attack, you swing into a single front. So what it was there was two formations, and then that's how the march started. So we were by the Virginia Monument, which is probably a stupid thing to do because you're technically not supposed to be on the battlefield at night because it's a national park. But we got out because there's a weird legend that if you lay in front of the Virginia Monument, hands come up and grab you. And I don't know why my sister wanted to try it out. And
Good for her.
I was like, man, I don't think this is a good idea. But so we're sitting there for a minute, and we saw this white fox, which is weird. I've never seen an albino fox since. But it was this white fox came out and looked at us. And I looked at my mom, and my mom I think she's very similar to you. She feels things. And she goes, we should get in the car. We should leave. And I'm like, yeah, I don't have a good feeling about this. This is weird. So we get in the car, and we start driving, and you have to do a circle around the monument. As we're doing the circle, fox runs back into the woods. I was like, okay, it's gone. But then out of nowhere, this fog showed up. And the fog was doing this. And my brother was in the front seat. He's like, oh my God. And we're gunning it down Confederate Avenue. And we actually got pulled over by a National Park Ranger. Because he was like, what's going on? And we were explaining what was happening, and they're like, why do you think, it's my neighbor. He goes, why do you think we don't let you idiots on the field at night? And they're like, we all know there's ghosts. So we get off Confederate Avenue, and we're going back down towards Steinway, and the freaking fox is there again. So I go, oh my God. And my brother goes, what? I was like, what did the Union Army call Lee? And he was like, that wildly white fox. And we were like,
Never mind.
I was like, oh my God, we just watched Pickett's Charge happen. Well, it's sad because, Pickett's Charge, it was, once they got to the Chambersburg Pike, that's when the Union line rose up and just fired into, because the whole thing was they thought they cleared the Union out. They thought they were going to attack an empty position. But when the Union Army rose up and, you see 100 American flags and regimental flags come up, you're like, and then they just laid into them. They fired. So you would have situations that literally lines of guys were dropping because they were just getting laid into by these bullets. And a lot of them didn't die then, but a lot of them, there's another thing that always, this is what I mean about, especially Gettysburg, which I think you would, I don't want to say enjoy it, but I think you would get a lot there.
Yeah.
Because, a story that often, me and him talk about this all the time, the pigs after the battle. Because, what you do after a fighting, you don't proceed until you know one side's gone.
Yeah.
So pretty much, Pickett's Charge ended. You had all these wounded Confederates left across the field, and even that positions like the southern part and the northern part where Union soldiers were still trapped in between the lines, wounded. At night, because the Confederates weren't going to attack again, because they got destroyed, and the Union weren't going to attack because they won. So they're like, well, we don't need to move forward, which George Meade would sadly suffer because he made that decision. But at night, the wild pigs came out and were eating the wounded. And they were saying how they could hear these guys screaming. You like the southern line, you're hearing your cousin is begging for help because these things are eating them alive. And, that just adds so much to that trauma that those guys probably went through. And that's why I always say, I go to the triangular field. That's where I get the most emotional. Because the way the triangular field is set up, I don't go in it. And even my brother, who's a skeptic, doesn't go in it. Because he's like, there's some weird Mojo Jojo in there. I don't want to mess with it. It's just the way that field is with the high grass and everything. There were so many guys that probably they just didn't see when they were trying to clean up the field that were sitting there days after days suffering because there was no help. There's often this story. I think this one actually scared Kelly, which I don't understand why this one scared Kelly of all the stories. But there's a story about this Confederate soldier who got knocked unconscious on the first day of the battle. And for the next 4 days, he laid in a barn. But the story's called Buried Alive. Because what happened was the Confederates, they didn't have time to bury guys. So what they did was the barn had a stone floor, so it would keep the bodies cool. They piled, I think, 40 bodies on top of this guy.
Dang,
so he woke up that night.
Oh!
So I was like, can you imagine just laying there with 40 guys you probably knew decaying on top of you?
No, I'm good.
And then, they found him on, I think, July 6th July 6th or 5th is when they finally found him. And he was catatonic because obviously he was sitting there because he was being crushed for 5 days or something, and he obviously died very soon after.
Yeah.
And I just they say the house that he lived in, they brought a priest in, did an exorcism because no one could live in the house longer than a month because the barn burned down, but then the house, but it's not the foundations, which were the stone floor, and they brought a priest in, and after that everything stopped, but people still don't want to live in there.
No. And I also believe that with the trauma with the land, but also to some people I'm gonna sound crazy. I'm also a firm believer in elementals. They're protectors of land. They're usually rooted in Native American culture. So when they say that this land is sacred to them because of their ancestors, it's because that is their ancestors, but also this idea of an elemental being that has never been human, but is protective of the land and those who inhabit it if you are granted access by it. So I feel a lot of battlefields can hold onto that and draw that kind of energy and entity in.
Well, that makes sense because what is a battle but a desecration of the elements?
Exactly.
You're using look at a battle like Waterloo. You know, the rain. If you want to use the elementals, the rain was probably their way of trying to stop it from happening. You know, making the ground muddy so they couldn't place artillery. We'll just bring in hay. We'll go right over it. Fire is a way to like back people up. We're just gonna send more soldiers in, break it through. You know, it's always this way of I said this actually during COVID. I said nature finds a way to correct itself.
Yep.
And I think it was, you know, I think that's a lot of what it is. And battles, I think specifically, you know, look at something like D-Day. How many, you know, we won, but how many died and suffered? That's why I'm myself concerned of going there, because I feel like I'm going to pick up a lot of that.
Yeah. And sometimes when I go into places, like even the Sorel Weed House, as often as I go, I'm, again, to people that aren't familiar with like mediumship and like the type of experiences that you experience with having heightened senses is, I make it very clear when I go in, like, this is your place, this is your home, I am invited in, you are not allowed to follow me home, you're not allowed to attach yourself to me, you're not allowed to, like, take a hitchhiking ghost home, essentially. And I'm here out of love and respect, and I hope that you would reiterate that. Like, I mean no harm, I don't mean to aggravate or insult, because that's not who I am when I'm going into these places. Yeah. But in the same breath, like, I don't know if Lex told you about what happened in the...
She was, honestly, seemed still very scared by it. Kelly was being a little more cavalier about everything, which kind of shocked me, considering how scared she was when I showed her Ghost of Gettysburg. But, because Alexis, and this isn't me bashing Alexis, because I love Alexis. Alexis seems like a very, I need the proof kind of person.
She is.
She needs to know why this is happening.
Yeah.
And I think, that's why I think people like that get so scared in those
scenarios.
Then
it's happening and
because it's
like,
what's going on?
Yeah.
Sorry, but
no, you're good.
It was my bank. And you know, that was something that actually happened at Gettysburg. So the Confederates hung 3 deserters at this place called Sachs Bridge, and me and my brother's friend were sitting there because there's another story called the Phantom Patrol. So my brothers went looking for the Phantom Patrol with my mom and sister, but me and my brother's friend were like, we're good, because I'm gonna get bayoneted. We have heavy New York accents. They're gonna know exactly where we're from. They're gonna want revenge. But me and him are sitting on the bridge, and there's these people taking pictures. And this is like in the middle of summer, and this cold chill comes through. I'm like, oh, that's weird. So we're sitting there, and we see a flash, and we're looking away from where apparently these guys got hung. And they take a flash, and I'll never forget this. We're sitting there like this, just staring, and the flash goes off. We see 3 guys above us hung, and we go...
Yeah.
And he is no longer a skeptic.
What did she tell you?
Who? Alexis? No, she didn't tell me anything. She just... The other thing is, I'm not saying I'm a spiritual person, but I am, as I said before, like my father, I'm very observant. And I can read people. You know, a lot of people, I think, like to think I'm just a clown. I'm a clown by choice. I see everything that's going on. I know everything that's going on. But with Alexis, I could just read her whole vibe. And I was like...
I'll have to show you pictures of her before she went in the house because she looked so scared. And Dante was like looking in the window because he was like, oh, like, what if I see something? And then he was like, Trinity, I saw something. And I was like, there's a tour going on inside. I'm sure it's a human.
That's a person, Dante.
That's a person. They're holding a light.
I'm sorry to tell you.
And then he was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And then, like, he actually came out of his shell a lot inside. Like, I can only think of 2 instances... 3 instances that, like, genuinely Alexis was like, I swear to God, Trinity. And I was like, that's just the way it is.
Well, that's also that idea that what can you do to them?
Right.
What can you do? They're dead.
Well, I will say, the first instance when we were upstairs in the parlor, we had some dowsing rods in the area.
I like those. Those are cool.
Right. And so I, like, let everybody try them who wanted to. And, like, Alexis was like, I'm not touching those things. And Kelly was like, you over my dead body. And I was like, okay, cool. So, like, Lauren tried. And she got, like, a little bit. Dante got a little bit. Colin was like, I'm like, okay. Dude, you put them in my hand. They're like, like, they're just going crazy. And they're like, you're just moving it. And I'm like, I swear to God, I'm not. And at one point, we were in the study with Mr. Sorrell. And I asked him, I was like, I feel you. Like, the feeling of like when you put your hand next to a static TV and like your whole hand tingles with it? It's the entire side of my body feels like that. And so I said, like, are you standing? Can you point to where you're standing? And Alexis is to my left, and he literally swings the dowsing rods between us, and she goes, that. Absolutely not. She put Kelly there, and Kelly was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you putting me there? And I was like, that's so cool. Like, he's going to move in a minute.
The best part of that is I know exactly how both of them looked in that situation. I just...
Like, the one person that's, like, super scared of everything is, like, Lauren. Lauren doesn't do anything spooky, and so Lauren's just watching this whole thing unfold, and she goes, as long as this is on that side of the room, I don't care.
One of the best things that ever happened to me in Gettysburg with my brother, who's a skeptic, which is funny because honestly, it probably wasn't a ghost. But we were standing outside the Farnsworth house because we were trying to meet up with my mom because her and some other people went into the town proper, and we were standing there for a second. And the Farnsworth house, so there's two locations reenactors go.
Yeah.
The Union always go to O'Rourke's, which is on Steinway, and the Confederates always go to the Farnsworth house because that's where Sweeney Taverns is. Have you ever heard the Peaches story with me?
It sounds familiar.
Kelly probably has told you about it, or Melissa, because I went into a violent rage over it, but that's for another day.
Okay.
I actually threatened to burn the town down. A cop literally saw me. Me and his mutual friend Josh was there, and a cop literally saw me get out of the car and then realized how tall I was and was like, because I was raging about this. But so we're standing out there waiting for my mom, and we're all just looking around, and we look up towards one of the windows, and we see a black felt glove come through the window and move the shade. My older brother goes, "Fuck that," and just runs. And then we all, because he's our older brother, so because I think I was like 8 at the time or something.
That's crazy.
So I'm like, if my older brother's afraid of it, I'm going to be afraid of it. So I ran after him, and we all realized a woman never died there. So why would there be a woman? But that's my favorite ghost story with him because it was probably the only time a ghost wasn't actually involved. And
that scared him far worse.
I know. It was so the funniest thing. We got all the way to the old visitor center, which the old visitor center. So the best way to put it is, I don't actually know how to describe it, how far we ran. Pretty much from here, you know where the Publix is that you passed?
Yeah.
So imagine running from here like a mile behind that Publix. That's what we ran. We were like, ah!
That's a lot.
All these, and the worst thing is, there's so many reenactors, you don't know who's a reenactor and who's not.
Yeah. That's Savannah, because we have reenactors that go up onto the trolleys that are dressed in period clothing. So, like, for me, I'm like, yeah.
Well, I told Alexis, the famous, where the frig was it? I think it was on Culp's Hill. One morning, me, my dad, and my cousin, because I don't know why, and this is when I was, like, older. My cousin and us, we were driving in the car, and I was actually a reenactor at the time, but we just went out early. My dad wanted to see the battlefield because, the only reason we started going there was because of him. So he hadn't been there with us, I think, in like 12 years, at least. Because even when my parents weren't separated, he stopped coming because he was a cop, so he was working a lot. And, we come up to Culp's Hill, and we see a regiment marching. And I was like, oh, this must be the Army of... Because there's different reenacting groups. One of the biggest reenacting groups is the Army of the Ohio, which they, you probably heard me and Todd talk about this sometimes. Yeah. They're like, I think, a few thousand people in that unit. And they all come to Gettysburg for Remembrance Day. So we're sitting there, and they're doing rifle drill, shoulder arms, support, marching, bayonet charges, things like that. And we're sitting there, and I'm like, wow, they're doing a really good job. Because the unit we were in was called the Mifflin Guard, which we were... one of the better units, but we weren't as big. There was maybe a few hundred of us in that unit. This was like a regiment, though. This was like 1,000 guys. And we were like, wow, they're really good. The way there's a special way you take out your bayonet that literally you don't have to turn your wrist. You literally just go, shh, shh. Like, it's really hard to do. And, like, I only know how to do it because I was in the Mifflin Guard, and that's literally, we spent 90% of our time drilling doing it. Because the whole point is you want to look the way they did. Really freaking good. And, my dad's like, I gotta get pictures of this, so this is like 2013 or something. Like, he's taking pictures of these guys. And we go to the national park because we were I was actually kind of pissed off because I was like, you have to go through hell to get permits to go in the national park as a unit like that. We've only done it like 4 times, and it was only for living histories. Like, we weren't able to do drills or stuff. And he goes in and we're talking to the national park people, and my dad goes, "That was really cool, that demonstration you guys had." And they go, "What demonstration?" And we're like, the soldiers by Culp's Hill. And they're like, "Soldiers by Culp's Hill?" So they call, because the way the national park is set up now, the rangers aren't actually in the museum. It's the Gettysburg Trust is running it. But so they call a ranger, and a ranger comes in and he goes, "What's going on?" And he's like, "Are there reenactors at Culp's Hill?" And they go, "No, they shouldn't be." So we're talking to them about it, and we describe it, what we saw, to the guy. And he goes, "Oh, those are the New York boys." And we go, "What?" And they're like, "Those are the New Yorkers." And I'm like, What do you mean those are the New Yorkers?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, those are guys from the 6th Corps. They, like, the whole regiment got massacred." And I was like,
Great. Amazing.
and my dad's sitting there, he's like, "Ah, you guys are full of shit. You're full." So we go home for like a week, and my dad calls me, he's like, "Come over now." And I'm like,
I'd love to see these pictures.
"Oh, dude, I actually, next time I go home, my grandma actually asked me if I would come start sorting through some of his stuff, because I want that picture."
Yeah.
It's just fog.
That's crazy.
There's no one in the picture. And I literally called my cousin. I'm like, "Bro, get over to Grandma and Grandpa's right now." And he comes over. He's like, "There was like 100 of them. There's like 1,000 of them." But it's like, it's stuff like that. That's why I keep going back to Chamberlain. Because I think it's even more special coming from him as a theologist.
Yeah.
Because I've had this discussion with you, if we're going to segue a bit into faith. I am of the opinion hell is not a place. Because in my mentality, it's stupid to send, and I think this is a pretty general belief, why would you send all these people to your biggest foe? I think the biggest hell would be the ghost realm. Like, not like, guardian angels kind of stuff, because that's your choice.
Yeah.
That's your choice to do that. But, like, to be, like, thinking about those guys, in my head, I'm like, "Oh, they're doing drill. It's really good." But in their minds, they're not.
No.
In their minds, they're about to go, face off with the Confederates.
They're reliving their hell.
Yeah, they're literally, and I have always thought about that. I'm like, that must be the worst kind of nightmare, to just every day die the same way you died, day after day, year after year, century after century. And I've always thought that. I'm like, I think hell and purgatory are the same thing, and I think that is the worst punishment you can get for anything you did in life, is just to be reliving those last. Someone like someone that often gets brought up with Gettysburg is General John Reynolds. He was the highest general killed at Gettysburg. He was a corps commander, and he got shot in the back of the head.
Damn.
And it's sad too to find out that a lot of the people say it was a sharpshooter that did it, but more historians than I myself am of the opinion of this, it was probably a stray bullet that killed him. And he got shot like right here in the back of his head. And I'm like, there's people that say they see him all the time. I'm like, can you imagine? He was a young guy. He was actually about to get married. And he's forever just feeling that day. Or someone like, do you know who Jenny Wade is?
Sounds familiar.
So Jenny Wade was the only civilian death in Gettysburg.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they shot her through the door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so, this is another quick little history tidbit about that. A lot of people are starting to say it wasn't a Confederate. Because what they think happened is the Confederates from the Farnsworth House started firing towards them. But the Farnsworth House and the Jenny Wade House are very far apart. I don't care how good a marksman you are. You're not hitting anything good. But there were soldiers sitting around the house, like relaxing from the battle, because the Wades were giving them water and bread. And the theory now, and especially last time we were there, I actually took a look at the door. The way the bullet went in kind of looks like it went
Going up.
Yeah. So what I think might have happened, because the other thing was the Union soldiers, from everything that was told about the incident, reacted a little too quick to hearing the fall. They reacted very quickly. So what I think probably happened was a soldier, the sharpshooter, started firing. The guys statically jumped up and were trying to get to cover. One guy tripped and fired through the door and shot her.
Yeah.
Because especially, it went through 2 doors.
And that's...
That's
you can't be too far away for that to pierce through 2 wooden doors.
Yeah, I think the front door was oak. I think it was like
it
was a heavy door.
Yeah.
And it went through it. So I'm of the opinion of that. But even her, most of the times there's sightings of her, they say she's making bread. And I'm like, that's like, can you imagine? Like, you just have to relive that over and over and over again. That's like that to me is the biggest hell. And that's why, the girl you told me you were talking about in Savannah, the slave, like, that's awful. That's what she's reliving every moment, is just this dread and pain.
And I felt that way about Molly, and I think that's why I really feel for her and I really connect with her, because it's heavy. And when we went up, I told everybody, like, when we go upstairs, like, I can't guarantee that I won't cry, and I can't guarantee that I'm going to be feeling a lot, because I typically do. And we were going up, and it was all 6 of us. And the thing that surprised me the most was because, like, the last time I took my friend Alexis, not our mutual friend, although we have to
my friend kind of tells me it's not our friend.
Was that, like, when we were upstairs in Molly's room, like, she felt like she was being held in, and I felt like she was definitely being singled out because she was a person of color. But, like, Alexis, Kelly, Lauren, me, and Dante all felt fine going up. Now, Dante is a person of color, so I was kind of surprised, but I was like, okay.
He's a guy.
He's a guy. And so I was like, okay, all right, like, maybe it's a little different, like, that's fine.
Well, that's the thing with slave masters, they feared the male slaves more than the females, clearly.
Well, Colin went, and you've met Colin. You're friendly with Colin. He is a little sunshine. He is
I love Colin. I talked to him today.
Right, he is the kindest person, and he's so genuinely sweet. And so when he only went up 3 stairs, he was like, I don't feel welcome. I was like, what do you mean you don't feel welcome? He was like, I don't think they want me going upstairs. And I was like, are you just anxious? Or is it, like, something you genuinely feel? And he was like, it might be my nerves. So he tried to go up the rest of the stairs. We get to the top of the stairs, and, like, the entire vibe shifted as soon as he got up there, and I went, that's weird. And then we started, like, using the dowsing rods and the spirit box, and I think Alexis was holding the spirit box, if I'm correct.
That's
We'll
perfect.
have to,
that's perfect.
Yeah.
That's
Her, like, I'll double check. It was either her or
that's my
Blackbeard
moment. That's my Blackbeard moment. Perfect. Perfect.
And I'm holding the dowsing rods, and I'm talking to Molly, but, like, when I'm talking to Molly, I'm getting direct responses through the dowsing rods, but then there's a gentleman coming through the spirit box reacting to her responses to me. So it was like I was having, like, a 3-way conversation with 2 different devices with 2 different people that were talking to each other.
Well, that makes sense too, because if it's the slave master, what his name is, Mr.
Francis Sorrell.
Sorrell.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That was actually James Longstreet. He's the guy who's actually in command of Picket Charge. His chief of staff's name was Sorrell. They might have actually. He might have been from Georgia. Actually, now that I think about it, they might be related.
His son was in the.
Was he an officer?
I'm not 100% sure. No, he served time in the military, and then he became a doctor.
That might be the same guy. I gotta look back up Sorrell. Sorrell was actually, the son, I guess.
Was his name Frank?
It might have been Francis. It might have been. I forget his actual name. I know he was a major during the Major Sorrell was his name. It might be the same guy, but yeah. But Jesus Christ, where was I going with this? Oh my God. Oh no, but like the whole idea, being a slave master, he's speaking through the box because he's trying to yell everyone down.
Right.
He's like, stop talking.
You could feel that.
Yeah.
And then Colin got up to the top of the stairs, and then I heard in my head again.
I like how, like, your little group has now, like, become like a like a character in this series in my podcast. No, the 6 of us.
Well, I mean, because everybody was there, and we were the only ones in the entire building. It was just the 6 of us, and I heard in my mind, "Get lost," and I was like, "Who are you going to tell me to get lost?"
Words.
Right. And then I heard it come through the spirit box, and it was the same gentleman that was yelling at Molly for talking to me. And then Colin was like, "Yep, I'm out. Peace out, dog. I'm going down." And then he went downstairs, and he was standing at the bottom of the staircase so that I could still see him from my point. And then I started asking Molly, I was like, is Mr. Sorrell trying to separate us? And she said, yes. And I went, is it because he's a white man? And it said, yes. And then I said, do you trust Colin? And she said, yes. Because after every answer I'd ask her to show me no, or, like, turn it away so that I would knew it was a definitive answer.
That made me just think of the Edmund Burke quote, all that it takes for evil to strive is for good men to do no good. And that's probably, what's more evil than a slave master. And then, honestly, Colin is one of the nicest and probably goodest people I know out there. Mm-hmm. So that makes sense that he would want to separate him. Because in his mind, it's Dante and then 4 girls.
Exactly.
Wait, 3 girls?
It was 4.
4 girls, yeah. You, Kelly, yes.
Yeah.
I was
That's
like,
another
let me count
strong
it. Kelly, Alexis, Trinity. Okay.
Yeah. And then, like, I asked, do you feel comfortable with him coming up? And she said yes. She hesitated, but she said yes. And I was like, Colin, you can come up. And he goes, I don't know. And I was like, okay, well, then I'll come down, and we can come up together.
I want to bring you guys to the orphanage in Gettysburg really bad.
I would love to go.
I want to bring you there.
And I get down to the bottom of the stairs, and, like, as soon as I get to the bottom of the stairs, I felt this absolute rage. Like, I was so mad to me that, like, Alexis was like, I don't think I've ever seen you that mad. Like, and it was just, like, instant. And she was like, I could tell it was you, like, being upset. And it was, like, your anger. But I could also feel the bitterness from Mr. Sorrell. And I remember, like, looking back at the top of the stairs, and I said, you don't get to do this. Like, you don't get to separate us. You don't get to try to belittle him because he doesn't serve the purpose that you wish him to serve. He's a good person, and he deserves to be here. You will allow us to go upstairs, and you will mind your business. And we went upstairs, and Colin said it felt completely different. He was like, it was like a 180. I feel like I can breathe it. Because he was like, I felt like hands were on my chest holding me back.
Well, that's, they say that it's because at the end of the day, we're animals, humans. As much as we have faith, we believe in the afterlife and everything, we're animals. Mm-hmm. My favorite movie quote is always Moriarty's quote in the second Sherlock Holmes, where he's like, oh, well, war's been averted. He's like, I don't think so. He's like, they're going to do it to themselves in a few years. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just the human nature. Yeah. I told that to Patrick once. I told him, because, everything going on right now. I told him, I was like, Patrick, I'm sorry to tell you this. There's going to be another war soon. And he's like, well, everyone, I was like, Patrick, tomorrow if every religion got erased, every political party got erased, everything got erased, we would find a reason to want to fight each other. Yeah. It's just how we are. That's why we're the apex predators on Earth. Because we generally love conflict. Mm-hmm. In the movie Patton, there's a scene, he's like, oh, Americans love conflict. Not only Americans, everyone loves conflict. Yeah. That's just how we are. That's why countries like Prussia and Russia were so powerful, because they just perfected it. Yeah. But, with Ghost especially, they have this mentality of, I'm dead, so there's nothing you can do to me. Exactly. But when you stand your ground against them, that's when they respect it. Exactly. They're like, I can do anything I want to you, but you're going to stand here?
Right. And I even told them, I was like, I'm sorry, like, I've never really had to stand my ground there before, and it was definitely weird. But then I was like, you will respect me while I'm in this space, and you don't get to do this. You don't have power over me. You don't own me. Yeah. And then immediately I was like, you will apologize to Colin. And it said affirmed, and it said, I'm sorry. And I said, thank you. That's all I ever wanted from you. You're good. You can leave now. We don't want you here anymore.
Go out of your room.
Yeah, go to your room.
Go to your room now, Sorrell. I gotta look this up now. Now it's killing me.
No, you're good. I then started talking to Molly again, and I was like, I'm really sorry about that. I understand why you probably felt hesitation with Colin coming up, because he is a white man. But I assure you, on my behalf, he is not like the person that hurt you. And...
it's him.
Is it really?
Yeah, Francis Sorrell.
That's crazy!
James Longstreet's aide de camp.
See? When the worlds collide.
That's... wow. That's crazy. Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
He met, because Lee, actually, a lot of people don't know this. You probably know this because you live in Savannah. Lee's a funny character because everyone thinks Lee was this, like, great general and everything. Lee actually lost all the battles he was involved in up until 1862. Mm-hmm. They actually liked him better as an engineering officer, and they sent him to Savannah, and that's what it says. That's where he met Sorrell, and he assigned him to Longstreet.
That's so cool.
That's interesting. That's actually pretty funny. Wow.
I can't believe that. But, like, see, they surprise me even when I know it's coming. But
yeah, that's crazy.
When, like, and you have to go, because even Lincoln and Jefferson went to Savannah.
When I was talking to Alexis about it, she's like, this sounds like a trip you would like. And yes. I was like, I think I would. I just, things have been happening, so I need to keep a distance and everything.
But it's definitely worth it. It's a 10 out of 10. I love the city. And...
are you trying to match me? I hate you.
Are you still on?
Yeah. Oh, okay. They know who you are. We're going to be talking about bombs next week. In history. But, you were saying, sorry.
No, you're good. In the end, like, at the house, Molly just thanked me for what I did because I got rid of him. And, like, Alexis, like, I started crying. I'm, like, tears rolling down my face, and Alexis is looking at me, and she's like, I've never seen anything like this before. Like, this is crazy. Like, you're getting direct responses. You're like, Colin's feeling it, you're feeling it, I'm feeling it. And she's like, I don't know how you live like this. And I'm like, and you only feel like a fraction of what I'm feeling right now.
Well, don't they say if you wake up like at like 3:30 in the morning, it's because someone's looking at you? Isn't that like that old verbiage?
Yes, and I can confirm that is true.
I don't like that.
Because
I don't like that
every
at all.
morning I wake up at 3:33 in the morning and there's always a man standing at the end of my bed.
Okay, you know it's so funny you say that. I wake up at 3:30 every morning, and I kind of just have, instead of believing someone's in there with me, I just I guess I gotta go to the bathroom.
That's
Guess I'm an
crazy.
old man. Oh, okay, I guess I'm an old man now. I just gotta go to the bathroom.
Not even kidding, a couple of days ago, I woke up like out of bed and like I was like in between being like I was definitely awake because I could feel myself sitting up, and I was looking around the room and like there was a gentleman literally standing next to me at like beside my bed, not
Yeah.
even at the foot, like beside me. It wasn't like he was looking over at me, but he was definitely watching me while I slept. And I was like, hello?
Don't like that. Don't
And so
like
I like
that.
grab my phone, I turn on the light, and I'm like, what the hell? And then it like took me a minute because usually like I feel them before I start getting information. And so I was like, I don't feel anything. Like, that's so weird. And I like completely forgot about it. And then a couple of days later, my roommate came up to me and she goes, can I say something? And I'm like, yeah, for sure. What's up? Because like I didn't tell the one roommate I moved in with that I was a medium until after she signed the lease.
Okay. You're bringing these demons into our home.
I was like, hey, I know, like, right now is a real bad time to tell you owe me $32,000 in legal fee. But, like, you already signed
This
the lease.
is false pretense that you entered this home.
Yeah. And then I was like, at first she was like, oh, that's cool. And then I told her about her grandma, and then, like, she was like, I believe you 100%. Like, I had her in tears.
Well,
through the whole thing.
that's just happened with us because there's stuff, like I said, there's no one in your group that would know any of that because I've done my best not to tell Kelly.
No, and you're not a
any of
very,
that.
like, personal person at work. Like, you're usually very, like, there for work-related things.
Yes.
And you'll tell me about, like, you going to Gettysburg and stuff like that because we share
Well, that's
mutual
our
interest.
common
Right.
call. Yeah.
Yeah. But she was like, I saw a man sitting on the couch the other day. And I was like, did he have dark hair? She was like, yeah. Is
Nope.
that Tony? Because there was a guy when we moved in. His name was Tony. He was like a 61-year-old, like, Italian man. Like, he had a really thick accent. He had, like, the gold chain.
Sounds like my kind of guy.
Right, he was
Sounds like my kind of
I
guy.
love Tony. Tony was a blast, and he would like always have the cabinet doors open. He would like he like broke the light in our fridge 3 times within the first 3 weeks we lived there, and I
Yeah.
was like calling him. They're like, we just fixed it. I'm like, okay, I know that, but he likes the light. You got to come fix it again.
He
And
likes to mess with us.
he does, and he would like flicker the light and change the thermostat, turn it off. Like he was a very active guy, but I was like, I don't know who this guy is. And then she was just like, have you seen him? And I went, I'm not going to tell you how I've seen him, but yes.
That's, my brother, my other brother, not the older skeptic, the one that believes in it. He always, when we go to Gettysburg, stays at this place called the Cemetery Hill Inn, which is, it's actually right next to where I usually stay with him at the Inn of 1863. But there's this story, they call it the Good Samaritan. And what it is at night, people feel something on top of them. So,
Knock on wood. I've never felt that, and I don't want to.
well, so because where the inn is, you could consider where firefights were going on.
Yeah.
Because it was the edge of the town. The Confederates built trenches with like furniture and stuff in the street, and the Union were pretty much just hiding behind hills, firing back. But so there's a very specific uniform orderlies would wear. And one night, because my brother was staying there, I was talking to him outside the hotel before I went back to my room, and we were talking, and I look up, and walking on one of the balconies, I see a guy, Union uniform. He has on his sleeve green chevrons. Those are orderly because it's the snake, the medical emblem. And I just stare at him for a second, and he stares down at me like this, and he just looks at me, and I just look at my brother, I go, why do you stay here? And he's like, what? I'm like, do you not see that guy? And he's like, what guy? And I look at him, I go, that guy's gone. I'm like,
Never mind.
this is why I'm not
Okay.
staying here.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not getting touched when I'm sleeping by these people. Like, but it's from the stories I've heard about him, he sincerely is just he's trying to help. He's trying to protect you because he'll, it's not like he's like choking you.
No.
He's like laying on you like to protect you from gunfire.
Yeah. But it's very scary.
Oh, it's horrifying. It's like sleep paralysis.
Yeah.
You're like,
That's your sleep paralysis demon. We don't want it.
yeah, no. But, and then there's that's the thing I actually am very for those of you that have watched from the beginning, I'm very big supporter of the Gettysburg Trust and the Civil War Trust and the Battlefield Trust, because what they're doing is they're starting to reclaim all this land where these guys died. So I think they just bought like 4 houses in Gettysburg and they're going to demolish them so it looks the way it did during the battle, which, property value, that's going to suck because now you're losing houses. But at the same time, it's like, why do you want to live there?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people just don't know.
Well, that's like the Gettysburg College. Gettysburg College used to, I used to tell Kelly about this because she's from that area. Gettysburg College used to be Penn State. That used to be Pennsylvania College. And obviously they used the basements as hospitals. And on the first day, what happened was in one of the buildings, they had a hospital set up. And there was a fear if the Confederates found them, they would kill everyone. Which wasn't generally what was done, but there was a fear. Because, when men are being violent, the adrenaline and, the testosterone kicks, and we turn into animals. And the surgeon ordered them to seal the doors. Now you're locked in a room with at least 100 men. A good portion of them are dead or dying. And you're seeing there were chemicals and everything. On July 4th, when the Union moved back into the town and were making sure everything was safe, they opened the doors to the basement. Everyone was dead. They literally choked on death. Then later, there's a story. This guy named Mark Nesbitt, which I hope to God he's still alive. I loved him. He was a very nice man. He used to be a park ranger, and he's actually the founder of Ghosts of Gettysburg. He was. They would call in because it's part of the national park technically, even though it's a functioning college. It's part of the national park. And there were these 2 administrators who were freaking out. They were like, there was some messed up prank. Someone did something with the elevator, brought us into the basement. They made this horrible scene. So Mark shows up there and he's sitting there, he's talking to them. He's like, what exactly did you see? He's like, oh, well, we got here, went to the basement, the door's open. There's a guy on the table getting his leg cut off. There's dead men and dying guys all over the place. There's orderlies, their faces are turning green. And then there's a guy standing there, he turns and looks at us and he's doing this. And Mark's like, were there walls down there? And she's like, no, they removed the walls somehow. So when it was Pennsylvania College, it was a cellar.
Yeah.
So you
wouldn't
didn't
have walls.
You wouldn't have walls. You just pack stuff in.
Yeah.
But now it's a computer lab with walls and stuff. So Mark goes down there with the cops, the Gettysburg police, and they're looking around and they're like,
we don't see anything.
They're like, if this was a prank, they had to have like contractors ready to put everything back. But then they found out this had happened to other people. And I'm like, that's like, that kind of falls into the category of the Good Samaritan. Like, they're doing this thing they think is going to save these guys, but inadvertently kills everyone.
Yeah.
And, no one's ever identified how the Good Samaritan probably died. I'm guessing he got shot because he was jumping on top of people. But it's, it's a very sad thing, especially when it's people like that, people trying to do good things.
Yeah.
That
and sometimes they just
died.
get a bad rep because you don't know the full story and you don't know what's going on, and then suddenly there's like this guy on top of you and he's like smothering you and he's trying to hold you down, and like that's very scary to people who don't know everything.
I think that's why it's important. There's people, that's why I've told my mother about this, about when I did see him. I was like, I think it's very important that they do show themselves, because that's probably how they figured out what he was really doing.
Yeah.
Because if that was just a regular infantryman or an officer or something, God knows what the solution would have been. But the fact that it was an orderly, and most of the time if you were an orderly, it meant you were a very religious person. That meant he's trying to protect you.
Yeah.
Especially where Cemetery Hill is, because they're gunning each other down. And honestly, that's the thing that's so sad about battlefields. I hate going to Jamestown in Brooklyn, because that's where the Hessians slaughtered the Virginians during the Battle of Brooklyn. And you feel it. Because what they did was they tied them to posts and did bayonet drill on them while they were alive. Hessians were hardcore.
Yeah.
They were hardcore guys. But it's, again, going back to Chamberlain, the spirits linger. You feel them. And you feel what they went through. And if you're blessed to, and that's, I told Kelly that once. I was like, I don't know if it's a blessing that they've showed me themselves. Like, you see this all the time. I don't consider myself a spiritually connected person. Like, I see it as they're showing themselves to me.
Yeah. And how they show themselves to you is also very important too, because I have seen people show me themselves as they were younger, like how they wish to be remembered, what they look like later in life. Sometimes they look just like the pictures that people show me.
Can I ask you, what's he wearing?
To me, it looks like a white shirt.
Checks out.
Like it's a. I can't tell if it's like just a white plain t-shirt or if it's like a white like golf shirt.
Could be either or, to be honest. That checks out with him, regardless.
Because I don't see a collar, but it's one of those like, what are they called? You know, like the Nike shirts that are like the
Dry fit.
yeah, the dry fit.
Like the ones I wear.
Yeah, they kind of look like that to me.
That makes sense because that's where I got that. Yeah, no. Well, that's the other thing because I always wonder like the way they show themselves.
And like I will say, personally, the scariest presentation that a spirit has shown me themselves is in their death state. I would never wish that on anyone, is to see somebody in their death state. That is terrifying.
It's not fun. It's not even fun seeing it in a ghost form. It's not.
No, like there's only one spirit that's shown me herself in her death state, and truly it is like, if you think seeing a ghost is scary, like seeing them in their death state is 10 times scarier. Because like personally for me, I was at home in Savannah and she was crouching at the end of my bed like a frog, like on her. It was so weird.
I don't like anything about that.
Right, she had long dark hair and she was sopping wet. She was wearing a blue dress, kind of looked like The Grudge almost.
Don't like that.
Right, and like for 2 weeks straight she just like hunkered down at the end of my bed, and like I could see her and I was like, what do you want? Like, what can I do to help you? Because like usually they come when they need help or they want to be like let go, and I'm like, I'm asking every archangel, I'm asking God, I'm asking Jesus himself, come take her to the light. Like, somebody please, I can't keep living like this.
Yeah, no, well, that's why I wear these all the time, because it's St. Patrick and St. Michael. This one's to keep snakes away, this is to keep evil.
They go hand in hand.
Yeah. I don't get people that like snakes. That's just me. No offense to you Slytherin psychos out there.
But I eventually went to my dad and I like sat down with him because my dad is a engineer within the city and he works for the county itself, Chatham, and he deals mostly with the agricultural part and like protecting of the wetlands and the protected areas federally and like statewide.
Yeah. Okay.
And I asked him, I was like, you have access to the database and you have access to records of the land before us, because we built the home on the land. Like, originally it was just swampland. And I was like, can you do me a favor and can you look into the history of this plot of land? I was like, I know it's a girl. She's between the ages of 17 and 23. I really believe her name begins with a K, and I'm getting 58. So I'm assuming it's 1958. She drowned. I don't know if she, like, to me it feels like a homicide, but it doesn't feel like it's a solved murder. So I don't know, can you look into it? And he did, and he found a girl. She was 19 years old. Her name was Katie. She was drowned in the retention pond behind my house in 1950. And as soon as I gave her a name, she left. And maybe she just wanted to be remembered. Like, even talking about it, like, I have goosies.
Yeah, I see. So where I lived in New York was actually part of land that was awarded to Grant after the war. So the year before I started working for where we are, I was taking a nap. Me and my brother were getting in a fight about something. He lost a lot of weight at this time, so in my mind I was like, whatever. But I was taking a nap, and I hear a noise downstairs. I'm like, oh, what the frick? So I open my door, and I look down the stairs, and I see what I thought was my brother in his union uniform, because the way in my house it was, we had our Civil War closets.
Yeah.
So that's where we would store all of our gear and stuff. So I go, what are you doing? It's 3:30 in the afternoon. What are you? And I'm staring a little clearer, and this man looks back up at me, and he has a mustache. And I'm like, either my brothers have mustaches.
Nice.
So I look at him for a second, and me in my old Brooklynese way, I grab a bat and I start going down the stairs. I look like Leatherface probably running down the stairs, and he walks into the closet. So I close the closet and I do this for a second, and my sister comes running. I go, call the cops, and she's like, what? I'm like, call the cops, and she's like, I'm like, there's someone in the closet, and she's like, open it, and I open it. No one's there.
Now let me ask you this: is some of the items that you have, were your costumes original to Civil War era?
Not me, but my brother. I don't like getting original stuff because I believe there's So I do World War II too. Mm-hmm. I had a real French Bible from the war. Mm-hmm. I was I would go to my reenactments. I would sit there because, French, I'd be reading. And I did know French pretty well. But I would always have this feeling of something was with me when I was reading it. To the point that because my closet was actually in my room usually. I usually stored all my reenacting stuff in my room, which is kind of dangerous when you have a musket. But also, if it's not loaded, it's not going to hurt anyone. And, if a ghost is loading it, there's a big problem there.
Yep.
But finally one day I was like, I can't have this in my room. I feel like someone's in here with me. It's so weird. So I put it in the closet in the living room, and my mom started saying, she's like, I don't know what's in the closet, but it's really making me uncomfortable. You need to move it. So I put it upstairs, and then my brothers are like, what is in the closet? Because it's everywhere I put it, someone was freaking out about it.
Was there a family name in the Bible?
No. But this is what I found out. I emailed the seller, and I said, where did you get this Bible? He's like, France. I'm like, thanks, Poindexter. Where in France? And he told me, he was like, actually, he's like, I don't like telling people this because it's kind of a sad story. And I said, what? And he goes, this was the Bible of a priest that was hiding Jews. And he got caught. And I was like, so this is a dead man's Bible. And he's like, well, it's going to be a dead man's Bible anyway. And I'm like, I was like,
he's not wrong. But
I was like, this is not like, oh, the guy had a stroke and passed away. This is a guy who was doing the morally right thing, got caught, and God knows what probably happened to him at a camp. He's like, oh yeah, he definitely died at the camp. I'm like, why are you being so cavalier about this? I was like, why are you being like, this is okay? So I ended up giving it to a historical society because
You're like, better with you than me.
Well, I don't want a freaking priest. God, I'm Catholic enough. I don't need another freaking priest hanging around me. But like, what I later found out though about the soldier was I had connections in town hall and stuff. So I reached out. I'm like, can you tell me what my property was before like the town grew? Because the town only grew after World War II. And they go, actually, this was the furthest excesses of Ulysses S. Grant's property. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then I'm like, did anything happen there? And they're like, yeah, a guard got murdered. And I was like, is there a picture of him? And they're like, probably in the city at the archives, not here. So I made a trip. I went out to the archives. Couldn't find anything. I was there for hours. Couldn't find a single thing. And then as I was leaving, I saw a flashing light. It was one of those emergency lights. And I walked over to it. And then I saw something, and it said my town's name on it. So I was like, So I opened it. Guys in the book. I was like,
all right.
I was like, sweet. I know, now I know.
Well, my dad, showed me the picture of her, and I'm like, that's exactly who I saw. And he goes, and she looked like that? Because, she was translucent blue. Swollen and just,
I think
even
that's...
the eyes were rolled back.
I think that's the story that scared Kelly the most from the Ghost of Gettysburg is the blue boy.
But that's probably why.
Well, because he froze to death.
Yeah.
And his face was frozen, and then when he came on the screen, she was like, ah!
Yeah, because, the whole thing, with us going home is, I share my stories a lot. I'm very open about it because I don't want anyone to be surprised. If there's a dead man next to it.
Yeah.
Don't put me in a Miller's because, God, ask Lauren about that. Anyway.
I've been wanting to actually have these kind of conversations with you forever, so I'm happy. I'm just saying it has to be through here, but I've always wanted to have these talks.
Some of it's crazy. Sometimes it's rapid fire where it's boom, boom, information.
Yeah.
And sometimes a lot, it comes to me, when you download files to a computer and you select all and drag them to a new folder and everything drops. That's exactly what happens, but I'm like, none of this makes sense to me. And it's a mosaic that I have to put together.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes I'll ask discovery questions because, it doesn't make sense to me, but it will to the person that it's meant to be delivered to.
Yes.
So, when I first came in, originally I thought your dad was your grandfather, and it's probably both because there's two men here.
What does the other man look like?
He's got, white hair.
Thin?
Yeah.
Sharp features?
Mm-hmm. He's very angular.
Yeah, that's definitely my other brother. That's my that sounds like my mom's dad.
And at first
he passed away the same year as my father.
Because originally I saw your dad, and I was like, okay, he was an older gentleman. He kind of died pretty young, younger than what I would assume would be our time. And he showed me you know how in Hercules they have the fate string, and then the fates try to cut it, and then it goes gold. Well, they show me a string, and it gets cut, which means our life ended too early. That we believe it would.
Yeah.
And so at first I thought it was your grandpa, and I was like, no, he's a little too young to be grandpa. And then like I saw the white hair and I went, no, that's a completely different person. That's not grandpa. That's probably dad.
Yeah, no, he passed away. I often call 2016 my hell year. That was
Did they pass the same year?
6 months apart.
That's probably why they show up together then for me. Because sometimes they do this thing called like piggybacking to me, where like one will come forward and then once they know that the line is established, they're like, oh, hey, I'm here. Hello.
Well, it's scary because my sister, and she's probably gonna hate me for bringing this up. I'll say right before my grandfather passed away, because he passed away in the fall of 2016. My sister had a dream. My father said, he's like, I'm going to take care of grandpa. I'm gonna save you, grandpa. Which we kept making the joke that the first thing my grandfather did when he got to heaven was lay my dad out, probably.
Well, and based off like what I'm feeling right now and like what I'm hearing is your dad was there when grandpa passed, and he kind of like welcomed him in a way that like he could see, like, I always tell people it's like third person, like they can see themselves in the room. They can also see the people that are with them, which is why they're able to know like if you said something or did something. And he makes me feel like it was time. And he knew it was like, he lived his life, he did like what he wanted, but it was like and it doesn't necessarily mean like the quality of life has to be good. Just that it was a long life. Because I firmly believe, based off my interaction with spirit, is you have quantity or quality.
Yeah.
And some people choose quantity over quality or quality over quantity. So they might have a fulfilling life in 36 years. But they might have a long life of 96 years. Yeah. And there's like, it's still substantial. It's still, like, you've seen a lot through your time. Like when my Grammy passed, that was really hard for me. Because the night she passed, she came to me in a dream at an airport. And I remember seeing her and I kept saying, like, you're dead though. Like, you're not here. You're not real. And she's like, I'm here, baby girl. Like, I'm here. You can touch me. You can hug me. You can give me a kiss. Like, I just have to go and I'm not going to come back.
Well, and not to bring Kelly back up again, she's told me, like, she's had dreams with her grandmother.
Yeah.
And
her grandma came to me in a Chewy's.
Yeah.
So picture that.
I told her, I was like, you need to hold on to that.
Yeah.
I was like, you can't be afraid of it or upset. I was like, because the dreams I've had about my father, at first I was scared, because at first I was like, why is this corresponding with things actually happening? Like,
it's because he knows what's going on in your life.
Yeah. Like, I remember, when me and my ex from when I left Disney broke up, he came to me and he's like, Timmy, you're going to meet someone better. He's like, you'll meet someone better. You deserve better. He's like, she doesn't realize what she missed. And he's like, you're the best. Don't ever let anyone make you feel different. Mm-hmm. Of course, I then got COVID literally like 2 weeks later. But yeah. I told Kelly, I'm like, you need to hold on when you see her. Because that's her wanting you to see her.
Yeah, and after I explained to her like the different things that, she either shows as signs or like things that Kelly hears in the house, I'm like, those are your grandma. Like, and they sound like a bump in the night. You're just like, but once you connect it, and I was like, sometimes like, do you ever feel like your arm goes to sleep, or like you feel like you've got like a hair on your cheek and there's nothing there? That's usually her giving you a kiss. That's usually her trying to make a physical connection, and your body's reacting to that. And I was like, if you don't know, it's startling, but if you just say like, thank you, grandma, or you like acknowledge it, more of it will come through.
And that's what, when I first moved here, I lived here alone, and people used to always ask me, are you afraid living by yourself? She used to ask me that all the time too. She's like, it has to be scary, because she was house sitting for me while I was away a lot. And I told her, I'm like, no, because I know they're here. I know they're with me. And it's just, you got to learn not to be afraid of it. Like, my sister was very afraid of it at the beginning, because it was.
I was too.
It's a very scary feeling. But, and again, if you're a pessimist, that's fine. That's your prerogative. It's a free country. You do whatever you want. I do believe it. I believe all of it. I believe it because seeing is believing. Yep. And I've seen things. And I've seen a lot of things. And, I told her that. And I think that's what scared her more than the video when she heard my stories. Because she's like, it's scary because you went through it. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah. And, when it comes to stuff like family members and, my sister having that dream. And, at my grandfather's funeral, I cried at the end. I didn't cry when he actually passed away. I didn't cry because at the end of the day, he did have a filled life. He was a very successful man. He raised a very good family. And I was sad because this was the last time I was going to see him. That's why I finally cried. But, you know, you need to hold on to those things. And, you know, like I said, my mother is very similar to you. She has a very good connection. I think, honestly, she probably is
And sometimes,
success.
like,
But
it comes out of nowhere. Truly, like, if you don't empower it and you don't, like, let it
Yeah.
get to you, it weakens over time. Because when I was younger, it was super active. Like, you can ask my dad. I was seeing stuff all the time, and he was constantly having the house blessed because he was like, she keeps saying stuff. Like, I was talking to a little boy for a really long time, and he made me do bad things. And then I had a lady that would watch me while I was sleeping. She would stand in the corner of my room, and I became, like, so paranoid and so scared to sleep. I had to sleep with all the lights on, like the hall light, my light, the lamp, and then I couldn't shower by myself. I'd have my mom sit in the bathroom with me while I showered
my
because I was
niece
so afraid.
used to live with us, and she used to talk at night. Like, I'd be sitting there playing, like, Minecraft or something with my friends, and I just go silent. I go, because she was in the room next to mine. I was like, and she'd be having these full-fledged conversations. I'm like, nope.
Yeah. And one time my dad,
He was there for one of those. He heard that.
that's crazy.
He's like, nope.
My dad had a whole, like, paranormal group come out to my house and was just like, I don't know what you got to do, but do whatever you got to do to get my baby girl to sleep. And I went to my Grammys
Yeah.
every Tuesday. So Tuesday night we were having dinner with Grammy. He brought them in, did his thing. And he said one of the guys that was in the group had been doing paranormal investigations for like 25 years and ran screaming out of my room.
Nope.
Because something chased him out because it wasn't his place. Like, that wasn't his room. And the same thing happened when he went into my parents' room. My parents had a closet that was so scary. Like, anytime, like, I could not tell you which room they were in. You'd walk in and knew it was in their room because, like, you would look to the closet. Like, you walked in and immediately just stared at it. Like, it was a portal.
Well, that was like my grandparents, my father's parents' house. My great-grandfather, Lewis, died there. Well, he actually died at the hospital, but he that's where he lived his last few years. And the room that was his, my dad was staying in for a little while after my parents separated. And I remember I would go in there because my dad would be like, oh, well, I gotta grab something, go get it for me. And I'd be like, okay. And I would go in there and I would just feel this fear because I was like, there's someone in here. And my dad's like, no one's in there. And then finally at one point, he's like, yeah, it's Grandpa Louie. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm like, he'll eat some fish. Which is ironic because I'm allergic to fish. But, yeah, no, those are definitely the things you need to hold on to when they do make themselves apparent. And that's why I remember even those who I am not connected to, like the people in Gettysburg, even the trench coat man, things like that, they wanted to show themselves.
Yeah.
That was their choice to do that. Because, again, I don't think I'm inclined as you. But, you know, the fact that they've showed themselves to me says a lot.
And personally, like, I have to turn it off at work because, like, you know how many people we see a day.
Well,
Like,
and there was that incident when you and me were talking about the Seminoles, and I was like,
Yeah.
around here it would make sense
right.
because
Which
we
I
killed them
saw
all.
him again like a week and a half ago.
Don't say that. I don't want to know. I don't want to know that.
Sorry.
I don't want to know
Okay, I
that.
take it back.
Yeah, no, they the Native Americans have always scared me with the ghosts because they are much more spiritual than we were.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that's why, you know, in Game of Thrones they talk about like the children of the forest. That's what I always like imagine the Native
That's
Americans are
terrifying.
kind of like.
Hate.
Yeah, I always imagine. I'm like, they're in the trees, man. They're in
They're
the trees.
everywhere. And I know that, like, even as somebody who's seen a lot of things, like, I would say from the time I was 10, because after, like, my dad brought those paranormal investigators in, they blessed the house, they even, like, they went through a lot. Like, they did everything. They even, like, left a candle in
I would
my
hope
room.
so.
Well, yeah. But it's because we didn't know what we were dealing with. And
Yeah.
my dad said the scariest thing I ever said to him was that night I came home because I walked in through my front door and he was sitting on the couch and I looked at him and I said, I don't know what you did, Dad, but they're gone. I'll sleep. And he was like, do you know how terrifying that is to have your, like, 9-year-old daughter come in and just say, like, the people are gone, Dad, I'll go to bed.
My sister, my niece once said, like, there's an old woman who follows you. And then she described what my grandma Gigi looked like. And she's like, is she mean? And she's like, no, she loves you very much, actually. And my sister, because we're all superstitious, I was like, nope. Nope. And but we are hitting 2.5 hours at this time. So we definitely will have you back on as a guest. Because I also have been having to use the toilet for the last hour.
Good.
But any last things before we sign off?
Trust your pets, trust your gut, and That's what I go by, truly, honest to God. And if you see something, say something. If you experience it, believe it, because 9 times out of 10, like, you just over-justify it.
All right. Well, Trinity, thank you for coming on. I hope to have you on again.
Yeah.
Everyone, next week we'll be talking about the gunpowder plot of November 5th in England, when Guy Fawkes, Robert Catesby, and Tom Percy tried to assassinate James I in Parliament. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you in the next one.